At 50 years old, Marcus Webb had learned that failure arrives quietly, not with the dramatic crash you see in movies, but with a whisper, a pink slip on your desk, divorce papers on the kitchen counter, your 11-year-old son who won't look you in the eye. The termination letter sat in front of him now, corporate letterhead gleaming under fluorescent lights. After 22 years with Pacific Northwestern Insurance, they were letting him go. Restructuring, they called it. Marcus called it what it was. He'd stopped caring 6 months ago, and management had noticed. He folded the letter carefully, slid it into his jacket pocket, and walked out of the office for the last time. Nobody said goodbye. In cubicle land, you became invisible long before they fired you. His apartment in Seattle was 12 blocks away. Marcus walked, letting the October rain soak through his coat. The cold felt honest, real. Everything else in his life had become a performance he no longer had the energy to maintain. Inside his apartment, Marcus poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a coffee mug. The good glasses were gone, along with everything else Sarah had taken. He stood at the window, watching traffic crawl through the rain, and tried to remember when he'd stopped fighting for his life. The custody hearing played on loop in his mind. 2 weeks ago, Sarah's lawyer had stood before the judge with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. Mr. Webb has repeatedly failed to provide a stable environment for his son. 3 different apartments in 2 years, job performance declining. He arrives late for scheduled visits. Your Honor, we're not questioning Mr. Webb's love for Ethan. We're questioning his capacity. Marcus had sat there, tied too tight, watching his ex-wife avoid his gaze. Sarah looked tired. They both looked tired. 10 years of marriage reduced to lawyers arguing about pickup times and who forgot to pack Ethan's inhaler. The judge had peered over reading glasses, expression neutral, but eyes sharp. Mr. Webb, your son needs consistency. Can you provide that? Marcus had opened his mouth. Nothing came out. What could he say? That he was trying? That he'd been trying for 2 years and kept failing? That every morning he woke up feeling like he was drowning in 3 feet of water? I'm doing my best, Your Honor. The judge had made a note. Marcus knew what that meant. Your best isn't good enough. Now, standing in his half-empty apartment with cheap whiskey burning his throat, Marcus stared at the photograph magneted to his refrigerator. Ethan at 8 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding up a fish they'd caught together on some long-ago weekend that felt like it belonged to a different man's life. When had that man disappeared? When had Marcus Webb, father and husband and someone who gave a damn, become this hollow thing going through motions? His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Probably his mother calling to ask if he was okay. He'd stopped answering those calls months ago because he didn't know how to lie to her anymore, and he couldn't tell her the truth. The phone buzzed again, then a third time. Marcus picked it up. Unknown number. He almost sent it to voicemail, but something made him answer. Mr. Marcus Webb? Speaking. This is Daniel Hargrove, attorney at law calling from Meridian Flats, Montana. I'm handling the estate of William Webb. I believe he was your grandfather. Marcus set down his mug. William. He hadn't heard that name in 15 years. Hadn't thought about him in longer. He was. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Webb. William passed away 3 weeks ago. Natural causes, in his sleep. There was a small private burial, per his wishes. Marcus felt nothing, then felt guilty for feeling nothing. His grandfather had been a hard man, silent, the kind who'd sit across a dinner table and make you feel small just by existing. Marcus's mother had moved them to Seattle when Marcus was 10, and he'd seen William maybe a dozen times after that. The last conversation had been brief, awkward, 15 years ago. I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus said, because you were supposed to say something. Mr. Webb, I'm calling because William left you his property, the ranch in Montana, 600 acres, the main house, all outbuildings, water rights, everything. It's yours now. Marcus blinked. Rain streaked down the window. Traffic sounds filtered up from the street. I don't understand. The ranch is yours. I'll need you to come to Montana to sign paperwork, but ownership transfers immediately. I can email you the details. Why would he leave it to me? You're his only living heir. His daughter, your mother Anne, formally declined inheritance years ago. That leaves you. The ranch hasn't operated in 30 years, Marcus said. It's abandoned. The lawyer paused. Not quite abandoned. Your grandfather lived there until his death, alone, but he maintained the property as best he could at his age. After the call ended, Marcus stood motionless in his kitchen, phone in hand, trying to process. 600 acres in Montana, a ranch he barely remembered, a grandfather he'd barely known. He opened his laptop and searched for images of Meridian Flats. Population 2,000. High plains country where the sky went on forever. Mountains in the distance like teeth. Marcus clicked through photos until he found one of the ranch itself, listed on some real estate blog from years ago. The main house looked weathered but solid. The barn was half collapsed. Everything else looked like it belonged to ghosts. He should sell it. Obviously, fly out, sign papers, list it with a realtor, take whatever money he could get, use it to stabilize his life, get a decent apartment, prove to the judge he could provide consistency. But something in him resisted. Some small voice he'd stopped listening to years ago whispered a different idea. What if you went there? What if you took Ethan and went? The thought should have been absurd. Marcus had no ranching experience. He'd lived in cities his entire adult life. He barely remembered Montana summers. And what he did remember felt more like dream than memory. The smell of hay and horse, his grandfather's weathered hands, the particular quality of silence that only exists in wide open spaces. And fear. He remembered fear too, though he couldn't remember why. Marcus pulled out this photograph he kept in his wallet. Different from the one on the fridge. This one was older, yellowed at the edges. Marcus at 10, standing next to William. Summer of 1991. The old man's hand heavy on young Marcus's shoulder. Neither of them smiling. Behind them, barely visible in the background, the ranch barn stood whole and painted white, before whatever happened that Marcus couldn't quite remember. He'd been there that summer when his mother suddenly packed them up and drove back to Seattle. Something had happened, something bad enough that his mother refused to ever talk about it, something that had turned his grandfather from a hard man into a silent ghost. At 50 years old, with nothing left to lose, Marcus Webb made a decision. 2 days later, he stood outside Sarah's house in Bellevue at 6 in the morning. His truck was packed, not much to pack. Clothes, books, the few things that mattered. The apartment lease ended next week anyway. He'd already emailed the landlord. Sarah answered the door in her bathrobe, confused. Marcus, what are you doing here? I need to talk to Ethan. It's 6 a.m. He's asleep. I'm leaving Seattle. I need to say goodbye. Sarah's expression shifted from confused to angry. You're running away. Again. The words hit harder because they were true, but also not quite true. Marcus met her eyes. My grandfather died. He left me his ranch in Montana. I'm going to fix it up, make something of it. A ranch? You don't know anything about ranching. I don't know anything about a lot of things, Sarah, but I'm good at learning, and I need to do something different because what I'm doing now is killing me. Sarah studied his face. Whatever she saw there made her anger soften. You look terrible. I feel terrible. I have for a long time. I need this. She sighed. Let me get Ethan. 5 minutes later, his son appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Ethan was tall for 11, all angles and awkwardness. He had his mother's dark hair and Marcus's gray eyes. He looked wary, the way he always looked around his father now. Hey, buddy, Marcus said. Sorry to wake you. I needed to tell you something. Ethan sat on the stairs, waiting. Not hostile, just distant, like talking to a stranger. I'm leaving Seattle. Going to Montana to fix up your great-grandfather's ranch. For how long? I don't know. A while, maybe permanently. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Not sadness, something else. Resignation, maybe. Okay. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Ethan, I want you to come with me. Sarah made a sound. Marcus held up his hand. I know about the custody arrangement. I'm not trying to violate it, but it's summer break. Come with me for the summer. Help me fix up the ranch. Fresh air, open space, no school. It'll be an adventure. Ethan looked at his mother, then back at Marcus. Do I have a choice? The question hurt more than it should have. Yes, you always have a choice. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then to Marcus's surprise, he nodded. Okay, I'll come. Sarah started to protest, but Ethan cut her off. It's okay, Mom. Maybe it'll be good. An hour later, they were on the road. Ethan sat in the passenger seat with earbuds in, staring out the window. Marcus drove, hands at 10 and 2, trying not to think too hard about what he was doing. The city fell away behind them. Concrete and traffic became forest and hills, then rolling farmland, then high desert. They crossed the Cascades, dropped into eastern Washington, kept going. The world opened up in ways Marcus had forgotten it could. They stopped for lunch at a roadside diner somewhere in Idaho. Grease and coffee and waitresses who called them honey. Ethan ordered a burger and actually took out his earbuds. Dad? Yeah? Why did we really come? Marcus could have lied. Could have given him some story about fresh starts and opportunities, but Ethan was 11, not stupid, and Marcus had promised himself he'd try harder, be better. Because I was tired. Tired of fighting your mother in court. Tired of my job. Tired of feeling like I was failing at everything that mattered. Your great-grandfather left me this place, and I thought maybe we could have a fresh start. Just you and me. Ethan absorbed this, chewing his burger slowly. Are you still tired? A little less than I was yesterday, Marcus said, and found that it was true. They drove on. Idaho became Montana. The land changed, became bigger somehow. Sky so wide it made you feel small in the best possible way. Rolling hills covered in sage and prairie grass that moved like water in the wind. Marcus remembered this landscape from 40 years ago. Summers when the ranch was alive, and his grandfather had been a force of nature with calloused hands and eyes that saw everything. That was before. Before whatever happened in 1991. Before William had become quieter, more withdrawn. Before Marcus's mother had packed them up and moved back east, saying only that some places hold too much sadness. They reached Meridian Flats as the sun started its descent. The town looked exactly like its photos. Main Street with a diner and hardware store and a handful of other businesses that had been there since the 50s. An American flag hung limp in the still air. Marcus drove through without stopping. The ranch was 15 miles outside town, down a 2-lane highway and then a dirt access road that hadn't been maintained in years. When they crested the rise and the ranch came into view below, Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. That's it? Ethan pulled out his earbuds, leaning forward. That's it. It looked worse than the photos. The main house still stood, weathered wood and stone built to last. But the barn to the east was half collapsed, roof caved in like something had taken a bite out of it. Corral fences hung at odd angles. Outbuildings sagged under decades of neglect. Everything was covered in dust and abandonment. Marcus pulled the truck up to the main house and killed the engine. The silence that followed was so complete, it seemed to ring in his ears. No traffic noise, no sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin walls, just wind in the creak of old wood settling. It's kind of creepy, Ethan said. But there was something in his voice that wasn't entirely negative. At 11, creepy could also mean interesting. It's home now, Marcus said, then wondered if that was true. Could a place you barely remembered become home again? They climbed out. Marcus stretched, feeling his lower back pop. 2 days of driving at 50 years old was different than it would have been at 30. Ethan was already walking toward the house, sneakers kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Marcus grabbed their bags and followed. The front door was unlocked. It opened with a groan that sounded almost human. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. Sheets covered furniture like sleeping giants. Marcus found a light switch and flipped it. Nothing happened. Power's probably been shut off. I'll call about getting it turned back on. They moved through the house room by room. The living room with its massive stone fireplace. The kitchen with its old cast iron stove and deep porcelain sink. The dining room where Marcus remembered sitting as a child, eating meals prepared by his grandmother before cancer took her. Everything was frozen in time. Dishes still in the cupboard, canned goods in the pantry, expired years ago, a newspaper on the kitchen table, dated 3 weeks before William died. The crossword partially completed in his grandfather's neat handwriting. Marcus picked up the newspaper, feeling the weight of evidence. His grandfather had lived here alone for 30 years, waking up, making coffee, doing crosswords, going to bed, day after day after day. Alone with whatever memories haunted him. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms. Marcus pointed Ethan to the one that had been his when he was a boy. It was smaller than his room in Seattle, but it had a window that looked out over the ranch and beyond to distant mountains. This was yours? Ethan asked, running his hand along the dusty windowsill. Long time ago. Marcus didn't mention that he could barely remember it. Those childhood summers had been bright and golden in memory, but details had faded. He remembered his grandfather teaching him to ride. Remembered the sound of cattle lowing in the evening. Remembered feeling safe in a way he'd never quite felt again. But the specifics were like photographs left too long in the sun. The colors had bled away. Marcus took the master bedroom for himself. It had been William's room. The bed was made with military precision, covers pulled tight enough to bounce a quarter on. On the nightstand sat a photograph in a simple wooden frame. Marcus picked it up, blowing dust from the glass. His grandmother smiled up at him, young and beautiful, standing next to William, who looked impossibly young himself, though his eyes already had that serious quality they'd never lost. Marcus set the photograph back down and moved to the desk in the corner. An old roll-top desk, oak, probably been in the family for generations. He tried the cover, locked. He tried the drawers, all locked. He filed that away as something to deal with later. They spent the rest of the afternoon making the house livable. Marcus got the water running after bleeding air from the pipes. He called the power company from his cell phone and arranged for reconnection the next day. They swept and dusted and pulled sheets off furniture. Marcus found candles and oil lamps in a closet, relics from a time before electricity had reached this far out. They'd need them tonight. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Marcus made dinner on the old gas stove. Canned soup and bread, nothing fancy, but it was hot and filling. They ate at the kitchen table, and for the first time in months, Marcus watched his son eat without his phone in his hand. There was no signal out here, no Wi-Fi. Ethan had discovered this quickly and adapted with a resignation that was both teenage and touching. "Dad," Ethan said between spoonfuls of soup, "why did we really come here?" Marcus set down his spoon. He'd known this question was coming. Ethan deserved honesty. "Because I was tired. Tired of fighting your mother in court. Tired of the city. Tired of feeling like I was failing at everything that mattered. Your great-grandfather left me this place, and I thought maybe we could have a fresh start. Just you and me." Ethan considered this, then nodded. "Are you still tired?" "A little less than I was yesterday," Marcus said, and found that it was true. After dinner, Marcus explored the property while there was still light. He walked past the gutted barn, noting the charred wood that suggested fire damage. The structure was still standing, but barely. Inside, he could see collapsed beams and debris. He made a mental note to keep Ethan away from it until he could assess the safety. The livestock pens were more interesting. They were built sturdy, the kind of construction meant to last generations. But some of the fencing had been moved recently. The wood was weathered, but the arrangement looked fresh, like someone had been using them within the last few weeks. Marcus crouched down, examining the dirt. Boot prints, not his own. Fresh cigarette butts lay scattered near one fence post. Someone had been here recently. Marcus stood, scanning the property with new eyes. The barn, the pens, the outbuildings. All of it supposedly abandoned since 1991. But the evidence suggested otherwise. Someone was using this place, or had been until very recently. He walked toward the silo in the distance. Tall and cylindrical, its metal skin rusted and pitted. As he approached, the last rays of sunlight hit it at an angle, and Marcus could have sworn he saw a light flicker in one of the high windows. He stopped, stared. The light didn't return. Just the sun, he told himself. Just playing tricks. But his grandfather's words from that last phone call 15 years ago echoed in his mind, words Marcus had nearly forgotten until now. "A son is a blessing and a burden, Marcus. Don't mess it up the way I did." What had his grandfather messed up? Marcus returned to the house as darkness fell. Ethan was already in bed, reading by candlelight. Marcus checked on him, made sure he was comfortable, then retreated to his own room. He'd brought the old hunting rifle from William's closet, more out of habit than any real sense of danger. But now he was glad to have it. He propped it in the corner within easy reach. He lay in his grandfather's bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the old house settling. Wood creaked. Wind whistled through gaps in the windows. Outside, somewhere distant, an owl called. Then he heard it. Footsteps on gravel. Marcus sat up, heart suddenly pounding. He moved to the window, careful not to disturb the curtain. The yard below was dark, lit only by starlight. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw a shadow move near the barn. Definitely human. Definitely not his imagination. He grabbed the rifle and moved downstairs as quietly as he could. At the front door, he hesitated. What was he going to do? Confront an intruder in the dark? Call a sheriff from a town he hadn't visited in 3 decades? The footsteps stopped. Marcus waited, barely breathing. Then he heard the sound of a truck engine in the distance, fading away. He stood there for a long time, rifle in hand, waiting for the sound to return. It didn't. Eventually, he locked the door, something he hadn't thought to do earlier, and went back upstairs. Sleep was a long time coming. When it finally arrived, it was restless and filled with dreams. Dreams of fire and smoke. Dreams of his grandfather's face, younger, shouting something Marcus couldn't hear. Dreams of running, always running, while orange light painted the world behind him. In the morning, Marcus woke to the smell of coffee. For a moment, he was confused. He hadn't set up the coffee maker. Didn't even know if there was one. But then he heard Ethan moving around downstairs and remembered the old percolator he'd seen in the kitchen cupboard. His son was learning to be self-sufficient out here. That was something. Marcus dressed quickly and headed downstairs. Ethan had indeed figured out the percolator and was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, reading a book he'd brought from the city. The morning light streaming through the windows made everything look less threatening than it had the night before. "Morning," Marcus said, pouring himself coffee. "Morning. Did you hear anything weird last night?" Marcus paused mid-pour. "Like what?" "I don't know. Footsteps, maybe? I thought I heard someone walking around outside." So Ethan had heard it too. Marcus decided not to lie. "Yeah, I heard it. Might have been an animal, or someone from town checking on the place." Ethan didn't look convinced, but he went back to his cereal. After breakfast, Marcus made a list of what needed doing. The power company would be out today. He needed to survey the property more thoroughly, and he needed to find a way into that locked desk upstairs. Something told him answers might be in there. He spent the morning exploring the outbuildings. Most were in better shape than the barn, though none had been used in years. He found old tools, rusted but serviceable, bags of feed that had turned to solid blocks, a tractor that might run again with some work. Everything spoke of a working ranch that had simply stopped one day, like a clock running down. It was when he ventured into the barn that he found the photograph. The structure was more dangerous than he'd thought. The roof had partially collapsed, probably in a fire, and the exposed beams were charred black. Marcus picked his way carefully through the debris, testing each step. Near what had once been a tack room, he found a beam that had fallen at an angle, creating a small space underneath. Something caught his eye, a glint of glass. He pulled out a photograph in a cheap frame that had somehow survived. The glass was cracked, but the picture was clear enough. 4 men stood in front of this very barn in better days. When the paint was fresh and the roof was whole, Marcus recognized his grandfather immediately. Younger, maybe in his 60s, but unmistakably him. 3 other men stood with him, all wearing work clothes, all smiling. Marcus turned the photograph over. On the back, written in his grandfather's neat handwriting, August 15th, 1991. Good men, good day. August 1991, 1 month before, according to the timeline Marcus had pieced together. 1 month before, whatever happened, that changed everything. But that wasn't what made Marcus's blood run cold. It was the face that had been scratched out. One of the 4 men had been deliberately defaced. The photograph carved with what looked like a knife. The face scraped away until only a white void remained. Someone had wanted to erase this man from the picture. The violence of the act suggested it hadn't been done casually. Marcus slipped the photograph into his jacket pocket and continued his exploration. But his mind was elsewhere. Who were these men? What had happened between August and the fire? And why had one face been scratched out with such fury? By noon, the power company had come and gone, and the house had electricity again. Marcus made sandwiches for lunch, then told Ethan he was driving into town for supplies. He didn't mention that he planned to ask questions about the ranch's history. Meridian Flats in daylight looked exactly as it had driving through yesterday. Main Street quiet, a few people going about their business, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed. Marcus parked in front of the diner. A bell chimed as he pushed through the door. Inside, the lunch crowd had mostly cleared out. A handful of farmers sat at the counter, nursing coffee and talking in low voices. They all looked up when Marcus entered. The conversation died. He'd expected this. Small towns had long memories. Marcus took a booth near the window. A waitress in her 60s, wearing a name tag that said Donna, approached with a pot of coffee. "Coffee? Please," she poured, movements practiced and efficient. "You're staying out at the Solace place." It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded anyway. "Webb place, actually. I'm William's grandson." Donna's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "Knew your grandfather. Good man. Quiet, especially toward the end. We were sorry to hear he passed." "Thank you. I'm trying to get the place back in order. Been abandoned a long time." "Since the fire," Donna said, setting the pot down. Her eyes held something Marcus couldn't quite read. Sympathy, maybe, or warning. "What can you tell me about that?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice casual. Donna glanced back at the farmers at the counter. They'd gone quiet, listening. She lowered her voice. "Not much to tell. Electrical fire in the old bunkhouse. 3 of your grandfather's hands were killed. Terrible thing. Your grandfather was never the same after." 3 men, Marcus said, pulling out the photograph. "Were these them?" Donna looked at the picture and her face went pale. She pushed it back toward him quickly, like it might burn her fingers. I don't know anything about that, she said, her voice suddenly cold. What do you want to eat? Marcus ordered a burger he didn't really want, just to keep her there a moment longer. The ranch hasn't been empty. Someone's been using it recently. Donna's hand shook slightly as she wrote down his order. You should be careful asking questions about the past. Some things are better left alone. Why? But she'd already walked away, disappearing into the kitchen without looking back. Marcus ate his burger in silence, feeling the weight of stares from the men at the counter. Nobody spoke to him. When he paid his bill, Donna took his money without meeting his eyes. He tried the hardware store next. The owner, an older woman named Martha, according to the sign, was more welcoming. She helped him pick out basic supplies and chatted about the weather in the town with easy comfort. Marcus waited until he'd paid before asking about the ranch. Your grandfather kept to himself mostly, Martha said, bagging his purchases. But he was good to this town. When the Mercers were running roughshod over people, your grandfather stood up to them. The Mercers? Martha's expression darkened. Bad family, father and 3 sons, running drugs and who knows what else through this county back in the 80s and early 90s. Sheriff couldn't touch them. They had connections, money. But your grandfather and his men, they put a stop to it. How? Martha lowered her voice. There was a confrontation out at your ranch. Things got ugly. The Mercers left town after that. All but one. Which one? Vincent. Youngest boy. He died in that fire. At least that's what folks say. Martha's eyes met his and Marcus saw something there. Doubt maybe, or fear. But nobody ever found a body. Marcus drove back to the ranch with more questions than answers. The photograph sat on the seat beside him. 3 smiling faces in one void where a face should be. When he arrived home, Ethan was sitting on the porch waiting. His face was troubled. Dad, he said, I found something. Marcus followed his son upstairs to Ethan's room. Behind the old wallpaper that was peeling near the bed, Ethan had discovered something scratched into the wall. Not scratched, drawn. Crude stick figures done in what looked like crayon or marker. A child's drawing. It showed buildings on fire, stick figures running, and in the corner, drawn larger than the others, a figure that seemed to be watching. I think you drew this, Ethan said quietly. When you were a kid. Marcus stared at the drawing and felt something shift in his memory. A flash of heat, smoke, his grandfather's voice shouting, the smell of burning wood and something worse. He'd been there the night of the fire. He'd been there, and somehow he'd forgotten. Dad? Ethan's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you okay? Marcus realized he was shaking. Memories were flooding back now, pieces of them, fragments sharp enough to cut. Orange light through a window. Young Marcus pressed against glass, watching. His grandfather's hand suddenly on his shoulder, pulling him away. Don't look, don't look. But Marcus had looked, had seen 3 men, shapes in flames, moving, screaming, trying to get out while the building collapsed around them. Had seen his grandfather on his knees in the dirt, face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Had heard sounds no child should hear. Sounds that Marcus's mind had buried for 30 years. I need to make a phone call, Marcus said. He called his mother from the kitchen, the old rotary phone still connected and miraculously working. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice wary when she heard his. Marcus, Mom, I need to know what happened here in 1991. Silence on the line. Then you shouldn't have gone back there. I need to know. No, you don't. Her voice was sharp now, frightened. Your father made sure we all forgot. You should stay forgotten. Mom, don't call me again about this, Marcus. And get Ethan out of that place before it's too late. The line went dead. Marcus stood there holding the phone, listening to the dial tone, and realized that whatever happened in 1991 wasn't just his grandfather's secret. It was his too. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Marcus heard the sound of a truck engine. He moved to the window and saw headlights in the distance, near the property line. They sat there for a long time, unmoving. Then they flicked off and the engine went quiet. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. Marcus checked that his rifle was loaded and sat in a chair by the window, watching the darkness. The light in the old silo flickered once, briefly, then went dark. He didn't sleep at all that night. Marcus spent the next morning working himself into exhaustion, partly to make progress on the ranch, partly to keep his mind from circling endlessly round what he'd remembered. The childhood drawing on Ethan's wall, the fragments of memory. 3 men burning. He fixed fence posts, cleared debris, cataloged what repairs would cost. Ethan helped where he could, and they fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. The boy had stopped wearing his earbuds constantly. Out here, without Wi-Fi or cell signal, he'd started paying attention to the world again. Dad, Ethan called from near the barn. Come look at this. Marcus walked over, wiping sweat from his forehead. Ethan was crouched by the fence line, pointing at the dirt. These tracks, they're fresh, like from last night. Marcus examined them. Boot prints, size 10 or 11, same as before. And there, caught on a splinter of wood, a fragment of dark fabric. Someone had been here, close enough to the barn to snag their clothing. We should go into town, Marcus said. Ask more questions. The diner had been a dead end, but there were other people in Meridian Flats. Other ways to learn what his grandfather had kept buried. They drove in together, Ethan quiet beside him, watching the landscape roll past. The boy had his mother's ability to sense when something was wrong, when the adults around him were carrying weight they wouldn't share. In town, Marcus parked outside a small restaurant with a hand-painted sign. Rosa's Kitchen. The name from the hardware store conversation came back to him. Rosa Torres, sister of Carlos, one of the men who died. Inside, the smell of cooking filled the air. Corn tortillas and simmering meat and spices that made Marcus's stomach remind him he'd skipped breakfast. A woman in her 60s was wiping down tables. She looked up when the bell chimed. We don't open until 11, she said, not unkindly. Are you Rosa Torres? Her expression shifted, became wary. Who's asking? Marcus Webb, William's grandson. I'm staying at the ranch now. Rosa set down her cloth slowly. I know who you are. Small town. Word travels. I need to ask you about your brother, about what happened in 1991. Rosa studied him for a long moment, then looked at Ethan standing in the doorway. Your son? Marcus nodded. Rosa sighed. Sit down, both of you. I'll make you breakfast. They sat at a corner table while Rosa moved around her kitchen with practiced ease. She brought them plates of huevos rancheros, beans, fresh tortillas. Food made with care, with love. The kind of food that heals something in you, even when you didn't know you needed healing. My brother Carlos was a good man, Rosa said, sitting across from them with her own coffee. He worked hard, sent money home to our mother in Mexico. Your grandfather gave him a job when no one else would hire an immigrant. Carlos was loyal to him, that's why he died. Marcus set down his fork. Do you know what happened that night? Only what the sheriff told us. Fire. Accident. Rosa's voice carried decades of disbelief. But Carlos's wife, she didn't believe it. She said Carlos called her that afternoon, said there was going to be trouble, that Mr. Webb and the other men were planning to confront someone. She begged him not to go, but he said he owed Mr. Webb his loyalty. Marcus felt the weight of that. His grandfather's decisions had cost good people their lives, even if his intentions had been to protect them. Does Carlos's wife still live in town? Rosa shook her head. She moved back to Mexico after. Couldn't stand this place anymore. Took their son with her. Their son? Tomas. He was 17 when his father died. Angry boy, wanted revenge. The sheriff warned him to let it go, said he'd arrest him if he caused trouble. So Tomas left with his mother. Haven't seen him since. Marcus's stomach tightened. How old would Tomas be now? Mid-40s, I suppose. Why? The man who'd been watching them in the parking lot, the one Ethan had noticed? Mid-40s felt about right. What did Tomas look like? Rosa's eyes narrowed. Tall, thin, had his father's eyes, dark and intense, and a scar here. She touched her left cheek, from a fight when he was young. Marcus remembered the shadow near the barn, the figure watching. Was it possible Tomas had come back after all these years? Thank you, Marcus said, for the food, for talking to me. Rosa reached across the table and gripped his hand. Your grandfather lived with guilt for 30 years. Don't you do the same. Whatever happened, it's not your burden to carry. But it was. Marcus could feel it settling onto his shoulders, the weight his grandfather had borne alone. The question was whether Marcus would let it crush him the way it had crushed William, or whether he'd find a way to carry it differently. After they left Rosa's, Marcus drove to the sheriff's office, a modest brick building with an American flag hanging from a pole out front. Inside, the air smelled like old coffee and paperwork. A man in his 60s sat behind the main desk, sheriff's badge gleaming on his chest. He looked up when Marcus entered, and something flickered in his eyes, recognition maybe, or calculation. Help you? I'm Marcus Webb. I inherited the ranch from William Webb. The sheriff nodded slowly. Ray Hutchins, sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was a fixture around here. I'm trying to learn more about what happened in 91, the fire that killed 3 men. Hutchins' expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped by 10 degrees. That was a long time ago. Before my time as sheriff, I was just a deputy then. But you remember it. Of course I remember it. Tragedy like that, whole town remembers. 3 good men dead, electrical fire in the old bunkhouse. Your grandfather was devastated. Was it really electrical? Marcus asked quietly. Hutchins leaned back in his chair. That's what the investigation determined. Why are you asking? Because someone's been on my property at night, watching, leaving signs. And everyone in this town acts terrified when I ask about 1991. Hutchins was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. Mr. Webb, I'm going to give you some advice. Free of charge. The past is the past. Your grandfather had his troubles, and those troubles are buried with him. Best leave them that way. Are you telling me you won't investigate? I'm telling you there is nothing to investigate. You've got some footprints and nerves from being in a new place. That's not a crime. You come back if something actually happens. Marcus left the sheriff's office feeling more isolated than ever. Nobody in this town wanted to help him uncover the truth. They all seemed invested in keeping secrets buried. As he walked back to his truck, a younger man in a deputy's uniform approached. Early 30s, earnest face, badge that still looked new. Mr. Webb, I'm Deputy Jake Santos. I heard you asking about 1991. Marcus glanced back at the sheriff's office. Santos followed his gaze. Hutchins doesn't know I'm talking to you. Can we meet somewhere private? They arranged to meet at an abandoned grain elevator outside town after dark. Santos wouldn't say more, just gave Marcus a look that said, trust me, this matters. The rest of the afternoon, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He and Ethan returned to the ranch, and Marcus spent hours searching William's study more thoroughly. The desk was still locked. He needed that key. If there were answers anywhere, they'd be in there. He searched the bedroom methodically, checked under the mattress, or behind pictures, inside books. Nothing. Then he remembered his grandmother, the Bible she'd kept, leather-bound and worn. Where would William have put it? He found it on a shelf in the living room, wedged between agricultural journals and old almanacs. Heavy, black leather, his grandmother's name inscribed in gold on the cover. Ann Webb, 1955. Marcus opened it carefully. The pages felt wrong, too light, too hollow. He examined it more closely and found that the center had been carved out, creating a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small brass key. His hands trembled slightly as he carried it upstairs. The key fit the desk lock perfectly, turning with a click that seemed too loud in the quiet house. The roll top slid back. Inside were papers, old bills, receipts. But in the bottom drawer, wrapped in oilcloth, was a journal. William's handwriting filled the pages. Marcus carried it to the window where the light was better and began to read. The early entries were mundane: weather observations, notes about cattle prices, reminders to repair fences. But as Marcus flipped forward to 1991, the tone changed. The entries became shorter, more tense. July 3rd, 1991. Vincent Mercer is back. Saw his truck on the access road. Tom says he's been nosing around the north pasture. Nothing good will come of this. July 18th, 1991. Found evidence of activity near the old line shack. Someone's been using it. Carlos tracked footprints back toward the Mercer property. We're being watched. August 2nd, 1991. Confronted Vincent Mercer today. He denies everything, but his eyes told the truth. He's running something through my land, using my ranch as cover. Told him to stay off my property. He laughed, said I was an old man who should mind his own business. August 15th, 1991. Talked to Tom, Carlos, and Jimmy. They want to go to the sheriff. I told them the sheriff won't do anything. Hutchins is in the Mercer's pocket. Everyone knows it. But we can't let this continue. Decided we'll handle it ourselves. God forgive us. And then nothing. The entry stopped. The remaining pages were blank. Marcus sat back, his mind racing. His grandfather and 3 men had confronted the Mercers over drug running. And then the fire happened. 3 good men died. But something didn't add up. If it was just an electrical fire, why did the locals act so strange? Why had his mother been so frightened? Marcus returned to the desk and searched more thoroughly. In a small side drawer, he found a stack of newspaper clippings, all related to the fire. Tragic fire claims 3 lives at Webb Ranch. Electrical malfunction, blame for fatal blaze. Community mourns, loss of local men. But tucked behind the clippings was something else. A letter never sent, written in William's hand. It was dated October 1991, a month after the fire. To whoever reads this, I am a coward and a liar. The fire was no accident. Vincent Mercer and his brothers came that night with guns and gasoline. They meant to kill us all, to make an example. Tom, Carlos, and Jimmy tried to stand with me. We barricaded ourselves in the bunkhouse when the shooting started. I thought we could wait them out. I was wrong. Vincent pulled a gun on me. I shot him. I killed him. I watched him fall. His brothers went insane with rage. Dean and Marcus Mercer. They doused the bunkhouse in gasoline, set it on fire with my men still inside. I tried to save them. God knows I tried. But the fire spread too fast, too hot. The smoke, the heat, I couldn't breathe, couldn't see. I got out through a window. Carlos, Tom, and Jimmy didn't make it. I heard them screaming. I heard them calling for help. I heard them die. The sheriff helped me cover it up. Hutchins was already on the Mercer payroll. He saw an opportunity. If we blamed it on electrical, the Mercers would leave town. His corruption would stay buried, and I wouldn't go to prison for murder, even if it was self-defense. I agreed because I was a coward, because I had a grandson I wanted to protect. You were there that night, Marcus, 10 years old, staying with me for the summer. You saw things no child should see. I sent you home the next day. Your mother helped me make sure you forgot. We never spoke of it again. But I never forgot. Every night for 30 years, I've seen those men burning. I've heard them screaming. I've lived with the knowledge that my choices killed three innocent men who trusted me. This is my confession. This is my shame. William Webb. Marcus read the letter 3 times, trying to process what his grandfather had confessed. Self-defense turned tragic. A cover-up to protect against retribution. 3 innocent men dead because they'd stood by a friend. The guilt must have been crushing. Marcus tucked the letter back into the desk carefully. He needed to show this to someone. To Deputy Santos, maybe. To someone who could help him understand what it meant for the present. Because if Vincent Mercer was dead, and his brothers had left town, then who was watching the ranch now? Who had been using the livestock pens? Who knew enough about 1991 to be sending messages? As the sun set, Marcus told Ethan he needed to run an errand. The boy looked worried. Can I come? Better you stay here. Lock the doors. I won't be long. Marcus drove to the grain elevator as darkness fell. The structure loomed against the purple sky, abandoned and skeletal. Santos's patrol car was already there, lights off. Marcus parked and climbed into the passenger seat of the patrol car. Santos handed him a manila folder without greeting. This is a copy of the original fire investigation report. I could lose my job for sharing this, but my Uncle Carlos deserves the truth to be known, even if it's 30 years late. Your uncle? Carlos Torres. Rosa's my aunt. I grew up hearing about the fire, about how the official story never made sense. Marcus opened the folder, scanning the pages by the overhead light. The report was detailed, technical, and full of red flags. The fire had started simultaneously in 3 locations. Impossible for an electrical malfunction. Accelerant traces had been found, but the investigator attributed them to stored gasoline and kerosene common on ranch properties. The bunkhouse had burned completely. The 3 victims identified primarily through dental records because the bodies were too severely damaged. But it was the witness statements that made Marcus's blood run cold. William Webb had claimed he wasn't on the property the night of the fire. A lie, according to his own letter. A neighbor reported seeing multiple vehicles on the access road around the time of the fire. But this had been dismissed as unreliable testimony. And most damning, one survivor had been pulled from the fire, severely burned but alive. Vincent Mercer, Marcus said. Santos nodded. He was transferred to the burn unit in Billings. Critical condition. The report says he died 3 days later. But there's no death certificate on file. No burial record. No follow-up investigation. It's like Vincent Mercer vanished into smoke. What does that mean? It means either Vincent survived and disappeared, or someone made him disappear. Santos's expression was grim. My family always believed your grandfather acted in self-defense. The Mercers were running drugs through this area, using ranch lands as cover. When your grandfather and his men confronted them, things went bad. My grandfather shot Vincent, Marcus said. He admitted it in a letter. Self-defense. Then Vincent's brother set fire to the bunkhouse with the others inside. Revenge. But here's what doesn't make sense. Santos pulled out another document. If Vincent died, why is there no body? Why no death certificate? Marcus felt pieces clicking together. Because he didn't die. He survived. Exactly. Santos handed him another paper. This is a property deed transfer from '92. The Mercer family ranch sold to a development company. The Mercer brothers, Dean and Marcus, left town right after. Dean moved to Wyoming. Marcus died in a bar fight in Cheyenne 5 years later. What about Dean? That's the interesting part. Dean Mercer came back to Montana 3 years ago. Lives in Billings now. Runs a construction company. Santos met Marcus's eyes. And 6 months ago, he started making inquiries about water rights in this county. Specifically about properties with access to the aquifer. Like my grandfather's ranch. Like your grandfather's ranch. The property's been getting more valuable. Development companies want the water. If someone could force you to sell, or if something happened to you and your son, the property would go to auction. Marcus felt sick. My grandfather's death was ruled natural causes. He went downhill fast in his last year. And now you're here and strange things are happening. What about Tomas Torres? Carlos's son, Rosa said he came back. Santos was quiet for a moment. Tomas did come back. Last year, but not alone. Dean Mercer brought him. They've been seen together around Billings. Some kind of business arrangement. Marcus's mind reeled. Why would Carlos's son work with the man whose brother killed his father? Unless Tomas didn't know the truth. Unless someone had lied to him. I need to file a formal complaint, Marcus said. Someone's been on my property. Someone left a threatening message for my son. Santos's expression was pained. Sheriff Hutchins won't act on it. He's known Dean Mercer for years. There are rumors that Hutchins might be on his payroll still. That's why I'm showing you this off the record. Santos gripped the steering wheel. Document everything. Keep your cameras running. If you get solid evidence of trespassing or threats, bring it directly to me. I'll bypass Hutchins and take it to the state police. Marcus nodded, but inside he felt the situation slipping beyond his control. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? Wait until they hurt my son? Be careful. Santos's voice was urgent. If Dean Mercer is involved, this isn't just about old revenge. It's about money. And people kill for a lot less than water rights are worth. Marcus drove home in the dark, the folder hidden under his seat, his mind churning. Ethan was safe in his room, reading by lamplight. Marcus checked on him, then sat in William's study with the journal open. He read the entries again, trying to see what he'd missed, trying to understand what his grandfather had been thinking, trying to piece together who knew what and when. Around midnight, he heard it again. The sound of a vehicle. Not close, but close enough. He moved to the window and saw headlights in the distance, near the property line. They sat there for 20 minutes, just watching. Then they turned off and drove away. Marcus grabbed his rifle and went outside, flashlight in hand. The night air was cold and still. He walked the perimeter of the house, checking for any signs of intrusion. Near the porch, he found something. A cigarette butt, still warm. Someone had been standing here, close enough to look through the windows, close enough to watch them sleep. Marcus's jaw clenched. This was escalating. First just tracks, now close approaches. How long before watching turned into something worse? He went back inside and called Santos on his cell. They were just here, outside my house. I've got a fresh cigarette butt. Can you save it? Santos asked. Put it in a plastic bag. That's evidence. What about tonight? What if they come back? You armed? Yes. Then stay alert. I'll drive by a few times tonight. But Marcus, if they approach the house, if they threaten you or your son directly, you call 911. I don't care if Hutchins responds. At least it'll be on record. After the call ended, Marcus sat in his grandfather's chair, rifle across his lap, and watched the darkness through the window. This was his life now, guarding against shadows, protecting his son from threats he didn't fully understand. He thought about William sitting in this same chair, carrying this same burden alone. The difference was, Marcus wouldn't stay silent. He wouldn't let guilt and fear poison him from the inside. He'd fight. He'd find the truth. And he'd make sure whoever was threatening his family faced consequences. But first, he needed to understand what he was up against. Who was Tomas Torres really? What had Dean Mercer told him? And was there any way to reach Tom's before things turned violent? The night stretched on. Marcus dozed fitfully, waking at every sound. Once he thought he heard voices in the distance, male voices speaking Spanish. But by the time he got outside, there was nothing. Just wind and darkness and the feeling of being watched. At dawn, exhausted and wired on adrenaline, Marcus made a decision. He needed to know more about Vincent Mercer, about what really happened to him, about whether the man was alive or dead. Because if Vincent was alive, everything changed. Dean Mercer's revenge would be based on a lie, and lies, Marcus had learned, were more dangerous than truth. He made coffee and waited for Ethan to wake. When his son came downstairs, Marcus was already at the kitchen table with William's journal open, taking notes. "Dad, you look terrible. Didn't sleep much. Bad dreams?" Something like that. Ethan poured himself cereal and sat across from Marcus. For a moment, they just existed together in the morning quiet. Father and son, both trying to understand a past that kept reaching forward to grab them. "Dad," Ethan said finally, "are we going to be okay?" Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. The boy was braver than Marcus had given him credit for, asking the hard questions, not running from uncomfortable truths. "Yeah," Marcus said, "we're going to be okay, I promise." It was a promise he intended to keep, no matter what it cost him. After breakfast, Marcus drove into town again. This time he went to the public library, a small single-story building that looked like it had been there since the 50s. Inside, a young librarian directed him to the microfiche machine where old newspapers were archived. Marcus spent 2 hours scrolling through coverage from August and September of '91. The fire had happened on August 16th. The stories were consistent. 3 dead, 1 survivor, electrical malfunction, tragedy. But on August 20th, there was a follow-up story, small and buried on page 6. Fire survivor transferred. Vincent Mercer, the sole survivor of last week's tragic fire at the Webb Ranch, has been transferred from Billings Regional Hospital to an undisclosed facility for continued treatment of severe burn injuries. Hospital officials declined to comment on his condition, citing patient privacy. And then nothing. No death announcement, no recovery story. Vincent Mercer had simply vanished from the public record. Marcus printed the articles and left the library with more questions than answers. If Vincent had survived, where was he now? Why had he disappeared? And did his brother Dean know the truth? As he walked back to his truck, Marcus felt eyes on him. He turned and saw a man standing across the street, leaning against a pickup truck. Mid-40s, dark hair, scar on his left cheek. Thomas Torres. The man stared at Marcus for a long moment. Not threatening, but not friendly either. Just watching, assessing. Marcus met his gaze, refusing to look away first. After what felt like forever, Tomas touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a mock salute. Then he climbed into his truck and drove away. Marcus's heart was pounding. That had been a message. "I know who you are. I'm watching you. I can get close anytime I want." He drove back to the ranch faster than he should have, checking his rearview mirror constantly. No one followed, but the feeling of being hunted didn't go away. At home, Ethan was on the porch with a book. He looked up when Marcus pulled in, and his expression said he could read the tension in his father's body. "What happened?" "I saw him, the man from the parking lot, Thomas Torres." "What did he do?" "Nothing. Just watched me." Marcus sat down on the porch steps. "But I think that's the point. They want us to know we're being watched. Want us scared enough to leave." "Are you scared?" Marcus thought about it honestly. "Yeah, I'm scared, but I'm also angry, and I'm tired of running from things." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Then what are we going to do?" "We're going to stay. We're going to fix up this ranch, and we're going to find out the truth about what happened here." Marcus looked at his son. "But I need you to promise me something. If things get dangerous, if I tell you to run, you run. No questions. No heroics. You get to safety." Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay, but only if you promise to come with me." "Deal." They shook hands on it. Man to man, father and son, partners in this mess they'd inherited. That evening, Marcus sat down and wrote everything out. A timeline, a list of names, what he knew, what he suspected, what he needed to find out. He felt like a detective in some noir film, trying to solve a 30-year-old crime while the criminals circled closer. William's journal sat open beside him. The last entry, August 15th, 1991. "Good men, good day. One day before everything went to hell." Marcus picked up a pen and turned to the next blank page. He wrote slowly, carefully. "To whoever reads this next, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm 50 years old, and I came to Montana thinking I'd find a fresh start. Instead, I found my grandfather's secrets, his guilt, his burden. I'm writing this in case something happens to me. In case Dean Mercer or Thomas Torres or whoever is watching this house decides that threats aren't enough. The truth is, Vincent Mercer is probably alive. William Webb shot him in self-defense. Vincent's brothers set a fire that killed 3 innocent men. The sheriff covered it up. And now, 30 years later, someone wants revenge or money or both. I have a son, Ethan. He's 11 years old and he deserves better than this. Better than threats in the night and fathers who keep secrets and grandfathers who let guilt destroy them. If you're reading this, take care of my boy. Tell him I tried. Tell him I didn't run. Marcus signed his name and dated it. Then he closed the journal and put it back in the desk next to William's confession. 2 generations of Webb men, both trying to protect their families, both caught in cycles of violence they hadn't started but couldn't escape. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Outside, the ranch was peaceful in the fading light. Somewhere out there, beyond the fence lines and the hills, men were planning, watching, waiting. But Marcus was done being passive, done waiting for violence to come to him. Tomorrow, he'd take the fight to them. He'd find Dean Mercer. He'd confront Tomas Torres. He'd force the truth into the light, whatever the cost. Because silence hadn't protected William, it had poisoned him. And Marcus refused to die the same way. Marcus woke before dawn, decision made. He'd spent 30 years avoiding conflict, running from hard conversations, letting life happen to him instead of shaping it. That ended today. He dressed quietly and went downstairs. The security cameras he'd ordered online were supposed to arrive this morning. Basic motion sensor system, nothing fancy, but enough to document who was coming onto his property. While coffee brewed, he pulled out the tactical maps he'd found in William's desk. His grandfather had been special forces in Vietnam. The maps showed the ranch marked with military precision, high ground positions, sight lines, choke points, places to defend if you had to. William had been preparing for war. Maybe not actively, but the knowledge was there, filed away in case the past came calling. Marcus spread the maps on the kitchen table and studied them by lamplight. The silo commanded views of all approach routes. The house and barn created natural barriers. The terrain favored someone who knew it well. He wasn't planning to fight, but if fighting came to him, he'd be ready. Ethan appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up, eyes still heavy with sleep. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Marcus said. "Coffee?" "I'm 11. Thought I'd ask." Ethan sat across from him, looking at the maps. "Are those Grandpa Williams?" "Yeah, he was in the military. Special forces." "Is that why he knew how to—" Ethan paused, searching for words. "How to survive what happened?" Marcus met his son's eyes. "Your great-grandfather survived a lot of things. War, loss, guilt. But I don't think he ever really figured out how to live with it all." "Is that what we're doing? Learning to live with it?" "We're learning not to run from it." They ate breakfast together as the sun rose, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and pink. Marcus felt something shift between them. Not quite healing, but movement toward it. The beginning of trust being rebuilt. The security cameras arrived mid-morning. Marcus spent 3 hours installing them around the property perimeter. Motion sensors at each corner, cameras covering the barn, the house entrance, the access road. He ran cables, mounted equipment, tested angles. Ethan helped, holding tools, asking questions, learning. The boy had good hands, careful and precise. Marcus remembered Sarah mentioning robotics club, something he'd been too absent to pay attention to. "How do you know how to do all this?" Ethan asked as Marcus wired the last camera. "I don't. I'm figuring it out as I go. That's what adults do mostly, figure things out as they go and hope it works." Ethan considered this. "I thought adults had all the answers. We're pretty good at pretending we do." By afternoon, the system was operational. Marcus showed Ethan how to check the feeds on his laptop, how to scroll back through recorded footage, how the motion detection worked. "If you see anything weird, you tell me immediately. Don't go investigate yourself. Understand?" Ethan nodded. "Dad, are you scared?" Marcus didn't lie. "Yeah, I'm scared, but fear's not the problem. Fear keeps you alert. The problem is letting fear paralyze you." They reviewed the first few hours of footage, mostly nothing. A deer wandering past at 2 a.m., a coyote slinking through at dawn. The ordinary wildlife of Montana backcountry. But at 3:47 a.m., something else appeared. A figure approached the barn. Human, definitely. Male from the build. The motion sensor should have triggered, but the video quality suddenly degraded, becoming pixelated and distorted. "Someone's jamming the signal," Marcus said. "Can they do that? With the right equipment? Yeah. Military grade or law enforcement." Marcus's stomach tightened. This wasn't random harassment by angry locals. This was professional, organized, someone with resources and knowledge. He switched to the other cameras. Same thing. At exactly 3:47 a.m., all feeds showed corruption. The jamming was systematic, covering the entire property. Whoever was doing this had money and expertise. That pointed to Dean Mercer, or to someone on law enforcement payroll who had access to the equipment. Marcus made a decision. He needed to check the barn more carefully. If someone had been there during the jamming, they might have left evidence. "You stay in the house," he told Ethan. "Watch the feeds. If you see anyone approach, you call Deputy Santos immediately." His number's programmed in the phone. What if they come in the house? Marcus showed Ethan the rifle in the closet. "You know how to use this? Mom made me take a gun safety course 2 years ago. For hunting." Marcus hadn't known that. Another thing he'd missed. "You point this at anyone who comes through that door who isn't me. You don't shoot unless you have to, but you make them know you will." Ethan's hands shook slightly as he held the rifle, but his jaw was set. Okay. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm, but the breeze carried cold. Marcus approached the barn carefully, checking angles, looking for anything out of place. Inside, he searched systematically. The collapsed area where he'd found the photograph, the old tack room, the loft where hay had once been stored. In the loft, he found it, a small device mounted on the rafters, camouflaged but visible once you knew to look. Not a jammer, a listening device. Professional grade, LED blinking softly in the shadows. Someone had been recording them, recording their conversations. Marcus's blood went cold. He climbed up and retrieved the device carefully. It was small, sophisticated, expensive, the kind of equipment that required authorization to purchase. He pulled out his phone and called Santos. The deputy arrived within 20 minutes, parking his patrol car near the house. Marcus met him by the barn, holding the device in a plastic bag. "This is law enforcement grade," Santos said, examining it. "Not something you buy online. This is equipment that requires federal authorization." "Meaning?" "Meaning someone in law enforcement put this here." Santos's face was grim, or someone with connections to law enforcement. They walked the property together, searching for more devices. Near the property line, in a hollow tree, they found the receiver. Weatherproof box containing recording equipment and storage drives. Santos photographed everything before touching it. "This is a criminal case now. Unauthorized surveillance. We can get warrants." He downloaded the data to a secure drive, hands steady despite the implications. "This has been recording for months," he said. "Since before you arrived. They were listening to my grandfather. And now they're listening to you." Back at the house, Santos set up his laptop on the kitchen table. Ethan watched from the doorway as they began reviewing the recordings. Most of it was mundane, William talking to himself, phone calls about ranch business, the lonely sounds of a man living alone. But as they scrolled back through the months, they found something else. 6 months ago, William's voice, thin and weak. "I know what you're doing. I can feel it in my body. The fatigue, the nausea, the way my hands shake. You're poisoning me." A pause, then William again. "But I can't prove it. Can't fight it. Too old, too tired." Marcus felt sick. His grandfather had known he was being murdered and had been too beaten down to fight back. Santos kept playing recordings. A phone call from 5 months ago, William's voice stronger, angrier. "I know what you want, Hutchins. I know you want the land. But I won't sell. Not to you, not to Mercer. When I'm gone, it goes to my grandson." The sheriff's voice came through tinny but clear. "William, you're a stubborn old fool. But everyone dies eventually. Natural causes. Sad but inevitable." The threat was explicit. Hutchins had just confessed to conspiracy on tape. Santos's face was pale. "This is enough for an arrest. For multiple arrests." "Keep going," Marcus said. "There's more." They found it 3 days ago, while Marcus had been in town. Voices in the house. The surveillance device picking up a conversation William wasn't alive to hear. 2 men, Hutchins and someone else. "The kid's in the way," Hutchins said. "Webb's getting nosy, asking questions in town." The other voice. "So what do you want me to do?" "Kids have accidents on ranches, falls from haylofts, trampled by horses, drowning in creeks." Marcus's vision went red. They were planning to kill Ethan, to murder his 11-year-old son and make it look like an accident. He stood up, fists clenched, breathing hard. Santos gripped his shoulder. "Listen to the rest." The second voice hesitant. "I signed up to scare them off, not to hurt a kid." Hutchins, cold. "You signed up for revenge, Torres. Your father's murderer's grandson is right there. Don't go soft now." A pause. Then the second voice, Thomas Torres. When? Hutchins. Soon. This week. Make it look natural. Marcus turned to Santos. That's conspiracy to commit murder. That's evidence. Santos was already making calls. State police, district attorney, people who outranked Hutchins, people who couldn't be bought. While Santos coordinated, Marcus scrolled through more recordings. He needed to understand everything. Needed to know what else had been said, what else had been planned. He found a recording from 4 months ago. Different voices, Dean Mercer and someone else. A doctor maybe, based on the conversation. His blood work shows elevated arsenic, the doctor said. If anyone checks thoroughly. No one will check, Mercer replied. Small doses, old man, natural organ failure. This is murder. This is justice. He killed my brother. Marcus stopped the playback. Arsenic poisoning. That's how they'd killed William. Slow doses over months, breaking down his organs, making it look like natural age-related decline. His grandfather had died in agony, alone, knowing he was being murdered, but too exhausted to fight back. Santos finished his calls and came back to the table. State police are coming. They'll be here in an hour. They're bringing a forensics team for the surveillance equipment, and they're issuing arrest warrants for Hutchins and Mercer. What about Tomas? Santos was quiet for a moment. Based on that recording, he's involved, but he hesitated about hurting a child. That might work in his favor. Or it might just mean he's conflicted about which murder he's willing to commit. Fair point. Marcus looked at his son standing in the doorway. Ethan's face was pale but composed. The boy had heard everything, had heard men planning to kill him. Ethan, Marcus started. I'm okay, Dad. His voice was steady. I'm scared, but I'm okay. We're leaving, right now. We'll stay in a hotel in Billings until this is resolved. Ethan shook his head. If we run, they'll just come after us somewhere else, or they'll hurt someone else to get to us. We should stay. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to pack their bags and drive until Montana was a memory. But Ethan was right. Running wouldn't solve this, it would just move the problem. Besides, the state police were coming. Arrests would be made. This would end today, one way or another. They waited. Santos stayed with them, weapon drawn, watching the monitors. Marcus kept his rifle close. Ethan sat at the table, pretending to read but watching the door. The hours stretched. Marcus made coffee, no one drank. The sun moved across the sky. The cameras showed nothing but empty landscape. Then at 4:37 p.m., movement on the access road monitor. Not state police, 5 trucks forming a semicircle around the house. Santos swore softly. That's not backup. Men climbed out of the vehicles. Marcus counted 8, all armed. Dean Mercer stepped forward, a man in his late 60s with a weathered face and cold eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. Beside him, a younger man with a scar on his left cheek. Thomas Torres. Get Ethan to the storm cellar, Santos said quietly. Now. Marcus didn't argue. He grabbed his son and moved. The cellar entrance was in the kitchen floor, hidden under a rug. He pulled it open and guided Ethan down the wooden steps. Below was darkness and damp earth. Marcus had been down here once, seen the supplies William had stored. Weapons, food, water. Enough to survive a siege. You stay here no matter what, Marcus said. You hear gunfire, you stay down. You hear me calling, you stay down. You only come up when Deputy Santos or state police tell you it's safe. Dad, don't! I'm not leaving you. I'm protecting you. That's what fathers do. He pulled the door shut and moved the rug back over it. From above, you couldn't tell the cellar existed. Santos was at the window watching the men position themselves. They know we're here. They saw my patrol car. Marcus picked up his rifle and chambered around. How long until state police arrive? 20 minutes, maybe less. We need to stall them that long. Or we need to end this right now. They moved to the front door. Marcus could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it. The moment we're talking ended and violence began. The moment men had been heading toward for 30 years. He thought about his grandfather, about Carlos, Tom, and Jimmy, about all the men who'd stood in similar moments, facing similar choices, hoping they'd survive to see tomorrow. Santos opened the door slowly. Both men stepped out onto the porch, weapons visible but not aimed. Dean Mercer stood 50 feet away, backlit by the late afternoon sun. His men spread out behind him, rifles ready. Marcus Webb, Mercer called out. We need to have a conversation about your grandfather's debt. Marcus kept his voice steady. My grandfather didn't owe you anything. He owed me a brother. He owed me 30 years of grief. Your brother pulled a gun first. My grandfather defended himself. A lie. It's in his journal, his confession. He wrote down everything that happened. Mercer's expression flickered. Uncertainty, maybe, or recognition that his narrative was crumbling. Even if that's true, he got 3 men killed. Good men who followed him into that bunkhouse. That blood's on his hands. Santos stepped forward. Mr. Mercer, I'm Deputy Jake Santos. I have recordings of you and Sheriff Hutchins planning to murder Marcus Webb and his son. I have evidence you poisoned William Webb with arsenic over a period of 6 months. State police are en route. You're under arrest. Hutchins' patrol car pulled up then, late to his own operation. The sheriff climbed out, saw the standoff, and moved to stand with Mercer. Deputy Santos, Hutchins said with false authority, stand down. This is a civil matter. This is conspiracy to murder. Santos didn't waver. I've already contacted state police. They'll be here in 15 minutes. You can surrender now or face additional charges. Hutchins laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really think they'll take your word over mine? A 30-year veteran versus a deputy who's been on the force 3 years? I have recordings. Your voice. Planning to kill a child. Planning how to make it look like an accident. For the first time, Hutchins looked uncertain. His eyes darted to Mercer. He's bluffing, Mercer said, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus saw movement behind the trucks. Tomas Torres, separating himself from the others, moving to the side. The young man's face was conflicted, torn. Tomas! Marcus called out. You don't have to do this. Your father wouldn't want this. You don't know what my father would want, Tomas shot back. You don't know anything about him. I know he died trying to stop drug runners from using innocent people's land. I know he stood by my grandfather when it would have been easier to walk away. I know he was brave. Marcus took a step forward, ignoring Santos's warning hand on his arm. And I know Dean Mercer lied to you. He told you my grandfather killed your father. But that's not what happened. Dean's brother set a fire. Your father was trying to escape. My grandfather tried to save him. Carlos Torres died a hero, and you're dishonoring his memory by working for the people who murdered him. Tomas's face twisted with confusion and rage. You're lying. Dean told me everything. He showed me evidence. He showed you what he wanted you to see. Marcus pulled out the photograph from his jacket. This was taken 1 day before the fire. Your father, Tom Chen, Jimmy Walsh, and my grandfather. Good men. Good day. My grandfather wrote that. One face is scratched out. Wanna guess whose? He threw the photograph toward Tomas. It landed in the dirt between them. That's Vincent Mercer's face scratched out in rage. Because Vincent started this. He ran drugs through our ranches. He threatened families. And when good men stood up to him, his brothers murdered them. Tomas picked up the photograph, staring at the 4 men. At his father's young face, smiling alive, standing with William Webb. Dean, Thomas said slowly, is this true? Mercer's expression hardened. Your father was collateral damage. He was in the way. Collateral damage, Tomas repeated. His voice was quiet, dangerous. My father had a name, Carlos Torres. He had a family, a wife who cried herself to sleep every night for 10 years, a son who grew up without him. He was in the wrong place, Mercer said dismissively. Thomas raised his rifle, not toward Marcus, toward Dean Mercer. What are you doing? Mercer's confidence cracked. What I should have done years ago. Tomas's hands were steady, finding out the truth. The situation exploded. Mercer's men moved, unsure who to aim at. Hutchins shouted orders no one followed. Santos called for everyone to stand down. Marcus did the only thing he could. He dove back into the house, yelling for Santos to follow. Gunfire erupted. Not aimed, just panic fire. Men shooting because other men were shooting. Marcus hit the floor, pulling Santos down with him. Through the window, he saw chaos. Tomas had taken cover behind a truck. 2 of Mercer's men were down, hit by their own side's wild shooting. The others scrambled for cover. Santos was on his radio, shouting for backup, giving their position, reporting shots fired. Where's Mercer? Marcus asked. Santos looked out carefully. There, he's trying to get to the barn. Marcus saw him. Dean Mercer, running in a crouch, carrying a gas can. The same play his brothers had used 30 years ago. If he couldn't have the land, he'd burn it. No, Marcus said, not again. He moved before Santos could stop him. Out the back door, keeping low, using the house for cover. He circled around toward the barn, rifle ready. Mercer was faster than he looked. Already at the barn entrance, unscrewing the gas cap. The smell of gasoline hit Marcus's nose, sharp and immediate. Put it down, Marcus shouted. Mercer turned, and for a moment they faced each other across 30 feet of dirt. Two men carrying their father's wars. Two men shaped by violence they hadn't started. Your grandfather should have sold, Mercer said. Should have known the Mercers always collect their debts. My grandfather survived Vietnam. Survived your brothers. Survived 30 years of guilt. Marcus kept his rifle trained on Mercer's chest. You're not taking anything else from my family. Then shoot me, because I'm burning this place to the ground. Mercer tipped the can. Gasoline splashed across the barn floor, spreading, pooling. He reached into his pocket for matches. A shot rang out, not from Marcus, from behind Mercer. Tomas Torres stood at the barnside entrance, rifle smoking. The shot had hit the dirt near Mercer's feet, close enough to make the old man jump back. Drop it, Tomas said. His voice was steady now. Certain. My father died in a fire you started. I won't let you burn anyone else. Mercer stared at him. You're choosing them over me after everything I've done for you? You didn't do anything for me. You used me. Used my grief and my anger. Made me think I was getting justice when all I was doing was helping you steal land. Tomas took a step closer. My father taught me that a man's character is defined by his choices. I've made bad choices. Following you, believing your lies, threatening an innocent kid. But I'm making a different choice now. Sirens cut through the air. State police, multiple vehicles coming fast up the access road. Mercer looked at the approaching lights, at Tomas, at Marcus. His face showed a man watching 30 years of planning collapse in minutes. He dropped the gas can and raised his hands. Marcus kept his rifle trained on him until state police surrounded the area. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, shouting commands, taking control of the scene. Hutchins tried to run, made it 10 feet before 3 troopers tackled him. They had him cuffed and on the ground in seconds. Mercer's men surrendered without resistance. They were hired help, not believers. With their boss caught, they had no reason to fight. A state police captain, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, approached Marcus. Captain Morrison, are you Marcus Webb? Yes, ma'am. Your son? Safe, in the storm cellar. Morrison nodded. We'll need your statement. We'll need statements from everyone. But first, she gestured to the paramedics. Let's make sure no one's seriously hurt. Marcus lowered his rifle finally, hands shaking from adrenaline. Santos came over and gripped his shoulder. You okay? No, but I'm alive. We're alive. Tomas Torres stood apart from the others, hands cuffed, but not roughly. He met Marcus's eyes across the yard. Thank you, Marcus said. Tomas nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About your son, about all of it. I let hate make me stupid. You stopped it when it mattered. That counts for something. Morrison approached Tomas. Mr. Torres, you'll need to come with us. But Deputy Santos has informed me of your cooperation in the recording that shows your hesitation to harm a child. That will be noted. After the police led Thomas away, Marcus went to the cellar and opened it. Ethan was sitting on the bottom step, flashlight in hand, rifle across his lap. It's over, Marcus said. You can come up now. Ethan climbed out slowly. His face was pale but dry. No tears, just exhaustion and relief. They sat on the porch while state police processed the scene. Photographs, evidence collection, statements. The machinery of justice grinding forward. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and red. The same colors as fire, Marcus thought, but also the colors of endings, of one day giving way to the next. Captain Morrison sat with them, taking their statements. She was thorough, professional, almost gentle. When they finished, she closed her notebook and looked at Marcus directly. You did good today. Protected your family. Stayed calm under pressure. Your grandfather would be proud. My grandfather got 3 good men killed. Your grandfather stood up to evil in the only way he knew how. Sometimes that's all any of us can do. The fact that it went wrong doesn't mean it was wrong to triage. Marcus thought about that. About William, alone for 30 years, carrying guilt that wasn't entirely his to carry. About how silence and shame had poisoned him more surely than the arsenic. As the police finished and began leaving, Santos came over one last time. Hutchins and Mercer are going away for a long time. Conspiracy to murder, actual murder in your grandfather's case, corruption, drug trafficking from back in the 90s. They're looking at life sentences. What about Tomas? That's complicated. He was involved in conspiracy, but he turned at the crucial moment. He'll probably do 2, maybe 3 years, with possibility of early parole if he cooperates fully. Marcus nodded. That seemed fair. Tomas had been manipulated, had believed lies, but had found his way to truth when it mattered most. After everyone left, after the sun set and stars emerged in the vast Montana sky, Marcus and Ethan sat on the porch in silence. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Dad, can we stay, even after all this?" Marcus thought about it, about the violence, about the fear, about his grandfather's ghost and all the men who died on this land. But he also thought about the sunrise that morning, about working alongside his son, about the feeling of standing your ground instead of running, about choosing to face truth instead of living with comfortable lies. "Yeah," Marcus said, "we can stay. We should stay. This is our home now." Ethan leaned against his father, and Marcus put his arm around him. They sat like that for a long time, watching stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the house, on the kitchen table, William's journal lay open. Marcus had written a new entry before the violence started. Now he'd need to write another one. The one that told how it ended, how silence and secrets and 30 years of guilt had finally been dragged into the light. How sometimes justice takes a generation to arrive. How the sins of fathers don't have to become the sins of sons. Marcus would write that tonight. But first, he'd sit here with Ethan and watch the stars and feel grateful that they were both alive to see another day. Tomorrow, they'd start rebuilding. The barn could be repaired. The ranch could operate again. Life could move forward. But tonight, they'd just sit together in the silence that followed storms. The good kind of silence. The kind that comes after truth. The days after the siege blurred together in a haze of statements and depositions and lawyers. Marcus and Ethan drove to Billings twice for meetings with the district attorney. Captain Morrison was thorough, patient, walking them through their testimony again and again until the story was airtight. Dean Mercer and Sheriff Hutchins were held without bail. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings alone would have been enough, but add in the surveillance equipment, the arsenic in Williams' medical records, and the testimony from Tomas Torres, and the prosecution had a case that couldn't be fought. Tomas was in county lockup, cooperating fully. His lawyer was negotiating a plea deal. 3 to 5 years probably, with credit for time served and possibility of early parole. Not great, but better than life. Marcus thought about visiting him, thought about what he'd say. "Thank you for stopping when it mattered. I forgive you for planning to hurt my son." The words wouldn't come right in his head, so he put it off. Meanwhile, the ranch needed attention. The barn still smelled like gasoline from Mercer's attempt to burn it. The security cameras had been damaged in the shooting. Fence posts needed replacing. Life didn't stop for trauma. It just kept demanding you show up. Ethan helped where he could, but the boy had grown quieter since the siege. Not withdrawn exactly, but more internal. Processing things in his own way. Marcus recognized it because he was doing the same thing. They were sitting on the porch one evening, 2 weeks after the arrests, when a black SUV came up the access road. Not state police, not anyone Marcus recognized. "Stay here," Marcus said, reaching for the rifle he now kept by the door. The SUV parked near the house. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Late 50s or early 60s, hard to tell. His face was scarred, badly, the kind of scarring that comes from severe burns. His hands were wrapped in bandages that looked permanent. The man stood there for a moment, looking at the ranch, at the barn, at the house. Then his eyes found Marcus on the porch. "Marcus Webb?" Marcus kept the rifle visible but not aimed. "Who's asking?" The man walked closer, slowly, hands visible. "My name is Vincent Mercer." The world seemed to tilt. Marcus heard Ethan gasp behind him. Vincent Mercer, the ghost that haunted this place. The man everyone thought was dead. "You're supposed to be dead," Marcus said. Vincent smiled, though with the scars it looked more like a grimace. "A lot of people thought that. For a long time, I let them think it." He stopped at the base of the porch steps. "I heard about Dean, about what happened. I came to set the record straight." Marcus lowered the rifle slightly. "How did you survive?" Vincent touched his face with bandaged hands. "Barely. 3rd degree burns over 40% of my body. Your grandfather pulled me out of that bunkhouse, dragged me through the fire while his own clothes were burning. He saved my life." The story Marcus had been told, the story in William's letter, had said William escaped alone. But here was Vincent, saying different. "My brother set that fire," Vincent continued. "Dean and Marcus. They went crazy when I got shot. Didn't care who else was in there. Didn't care that I was in there too. They just wanted everyone dead." Marcus tried to process this. "William saved you?" "He tried to save all of us. Got me out first because I was closest to the window. Went back for the others. The smoke was too thick by then, the heat too intense. He couldn't reach them. Vincent's voice cracked. Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, Jimmy Walsh, they died because of my family. Because I was running drugs through these ranches and thought I was untouchable. Why did everyone think you were dead? Vincent sat down on the porch steps without asking permission. Because I wanted them to. The FBI came to me in the hospital. Said they'd been building a case against the Mexican cartel my brothers were working with. Said if I testified, they'd give me witness protection. New identity, new life. All I had to do was die. So you did. So I did. Vincent looked at his scarred hands, became someone else, moved to Oregon, built a different life. But I kept tabs on this place, on your grandfather, on Dean. Did William know you were alive? Eventually, the FBI told him years later when they needed his testimony for a related case. It destroyed something in him. Vincent's voice was quiet. He'd lived with guilt for 30 years thinking he'd killed me. Then he found out I was alive, and the guilt just shifted. Guilt that 3 men died while he saved the wrong one. You weren't the wrong one. Try telling that to a man like William Webb. He believed in justice, in right and wrong, in saving the good guys. And I wasn't a good guy. Marcus sat down on the porch beside Vincent. Neither man spoke for a while. Ethan came out and sat on Marcus's other side, the three of them watching the sun descend toward the mountains. Why come forward now? Marcus asked finally. Because Dean's in custody. Because the FBI doesn't need me hidden anymore. The cartel collapsed years ago. And because I heard what Dean tried to do, heard he was going after William's grandson, going after a kid. Vincent turned to look at Ethan. You must be about 11? Ethan nodded. I had a son once. He'd be in his 40s now. Haven't seen him since he was 7. That was part of the deal. No contact with my old life. No way for the cartel to track me through family. The pain in Vincent's voice was raw. He'd given up everything. Family, identity, his own face. And he'd lived 30 years knowing he was the reason 3 good men died. Will you testify? Marcus asked. Against Dean? I already have. Gave a deposition to the district attorney yesterday. Everything that happened in 1991. How Dean and Marcus Mercer set that fire. How William Webb tried to save everyone. How he succeeded with me and failed with the others. Vincent stood slowly, joints creaking. I wanted you to hear it from me. Wanted you to know your grandfather wasn't a coward, wasn't a murderer. He was a man who stood up to evil and paid for it every day of his life. Marcus stood too. Thank you for coming. Vincent walked back to his SUV, then paused. One more thing. Your grandfather left something for you. If you ever figured out the truth, it's in the barn, buried under the northwest corner post. What is it? I don't know. He just told me if his grandson ever came back, if you ever learned what really happened, I should tell you where to look. After Vincent drove away, Marcus and Ethan went to the barn. The northwest corner post was old-growth timber, sunk 3 feet into the ground. They dug around it with shovels, working in the fading light. 2 feet down, they hit metal, a box, similar to the one they had found under the oak tree. Marcus pulled it free and brushed off the dirt. Inside was a letter addressed to Marcus, and beneath it, a smaller envelope addressed to Ethan Webb. Marcus opened his first. William's handwriting, shakier than in the journal, written perhaps in his final days. Marcus, if you're reading this, you've learned the truth. You know about Vincent, about the fire, about my 30 years of lies and silence. I want you to know I tried. I tried to save them all. I got Vincent out because he was by the window, because I could reach him. I went back for Carlos and Tom and Jimmy. The smoke was black, thick as tar. The heat was like standing in front of a blast furnace. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't find them. I heard them screaming. I heard them calling my name, and I couldn't reach them. That sound has lived in my head every day since. Every night when I close my eyes, I hear them burning. Vincent survived because of me, but 3 good men died while I saved the wrong one. That's the mathematics of tragedy, Marcus. Sometimes you save 1 and lose 3. Sometimes your best isn't good enough. I kept silent because I was ashamed, because I couldn't face Carlos's wife, Tom's widow, Jimmy's parents, because admitting I failed felt worse than pretending it never happened. But silence didn't protect anyone. It just poisoned me from the inside. Don't make my mistakes, Marcus. Don't let shame make you silent. Don't let guilt make you small. You stood up to Dean Mercer. You protected your son. You did what I couldn't do. You broke the cycle. I'm proud of you. I love you. I'm sorry I never said those words when I had breath in my body to speak them. Your grandfather, William, Marcus read it twice, throat tight, eyes burning. His grandfather had carried this weight alone, had let it crush him rather than share it, had died believing he was a failure when really he'd been a man who tried everything he could in an impossible situation. Dad? Ethan held up the smaller envelope. Can I open this? Marcus nodded. Ethan tore it open carefully. Inside was a single page, William's handwriting again. Ethan, we never met. I died before you came to the ranch. But your father has told me about you in our phone calls over the years. He says you're smart, curious, kind. Those are good qualities for a man to have. Hold on to them. I'm writing this because I want you to know something. Your father thinks he failed you, failed your mother, failed at everything that mattered. He's wrong. Failure isn't falling down. Failure is refusing to stand back up. Your father has fallen. He's made mistakes. But he keeps standing up, keeps trying. That's what men do. Not heroes, not saints, just men trying their best in a complicated world. Be patient with him. Be honest with him. Help him be the father he's trying to become. And someday, when you're older, when you have your own struggles and your own regrets, remember that your great-grandfather loved you enough to write you this letter. Remember that good men can carry bad guilt. Remember that the truth, however painful, is always better than comfortable lies. You come from a line of men who stood up to evil, who tried to do right even when right was hard. Be proud of that, them. William Webb. Ethan read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. He didn't cry, but his eyes were bright. Dad, he said, I think we should go see Thomas Torres. Marcus was surprised. Why? Because Grandpa William tried to save his father. Because Tomas stopped Dean when it mattered. Because maybe he needs to know the whole truth too. The county jail was a squat concrete building on the edge of Billings. They drove there the next day, Marcus calling ahead to arrange a visit. The guards checked them carefully, confiscated Marcus's keys and wallet, led them through metal detectors and locked doors. Tomas Torres sat in the visiting room wearing orange jail scrubs, looking thinner than he had 2 weeks ago. His scar stood out stark against pale skin. When he saw Marcus and Ethan, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe shame. They sat across from him, a scratched plexiglass divider between them. Tomas picked up the phone handset. Marcus did the same. Why are you here? Tomas asked. To tell you the truth? The whole truth about what happened to your father. Tomas leaned back. I already know. Your grandfather got him killed trying to play hero. My grandfather tried to save him. Marcus kept his voice even. Vincent Mercer told us yesterday. He's alive, Tomas. Vincent survived the fire, and he said William pulled him out, then went back for your father and the others. The smoke was too thick. He couldn't reach them. But he tried. Tomas's face showed confusion. Vincent's alive, has been for 30 years. Witness protection. He testified against your family's cartel connections. But Dean said, Thomas trailed off, realization dawning. Dean lied about everything. Dean needed you angry, needed you focused on revenge. So he told you what would make you hate the Webb family. But your father died because Dean's brother Marcus Mercer set a fire. Carlos Torres was a hero who stood up to drug runners, and William Webb tried desperately to save him. Marcus pulled out the photograph, the one with 4 men smiling. He held it up to the glass. This was taken the day before the fire. Your father, my grandfather, Tom Chen, Jimmy Walsh. Good men who stood together against evil. Your father's legacy isn't being a victim. It's being a man who wouldn't back down when people needed him. Tomas stared at the photograph, and this time tears came. He put his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Ethan picked up the phone on his side. Mr. Torres, my great-grandfather left me a letter. He said good men can carry bad guilt. That truth is better than lies. I think he'd want me to tell you that your father was a good man, and I think becoming a good man yourself is the best way to honor him. Tomas looked up, eyes red. I'm in jail, kid. I helped plan to hurt you. I'm not a good man. You stopped when it mattered. That counts. After the visit, driving back to the ranch, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. A loosening, like a knot that had been there so long he'd forgotten it existed was finally coming undone. He thought about his grandfather, alone in that ranch house, carrying guilt that wasn't entirely his to carry. Thought about all the conversations they never had, all the forgiveness that could have been offered but wasn't. He wouldn't make that mistake with Ethan. Wouldn't let silence grow between them. wouldn't let shame keep him from saying the things that mattered. That night, he sat down with his son and they talked, really talked, about the divorce, about Marcus's failures as a father, about Sarah in Seattle, and all the ways Marcus had been absent even when he was physically present. Ethan listened, asked questions, shared his own hurt. It wasn't comfortable. There were tears. There were hard truths, but there was also something else. The beginning of real understanding, real connection. "I'm going to do better," Marcus said finally. "Not perfect. I'll still mess up, but better." "I know, Dad. You already are." The next week, the district attorney called. The trial date was set, 3 months away. Both Dean Mercer and Ray Hutchins were pleading not guilty despite overwhelming evidence. Their lawyers wanted to fight it, maybe hoping for some technicality, some way to muddy the waters. Vincent Mercer would testify. Tomas Torres would testify. Marcus would testify. The recordings would be played. The surveillance equipment would be entered as evidence. The arsenic levels in William's blood would be presented by medical experts. It would be a media circus. The prosecutor warned them about reporters, about cameras, about their lives being dissected in public. Marcus didn't care. The truth was coming out one way or another. While they waited for trial, life continued. Marcus hired 2 ranch hands, local men who'd worked cattle their whole lives. They helped him get the operation running. Cattle were purchased. Fences were repaired. The barn was cleaned and reinforced. Slowly, the ranch came back to life. Ethan started working alongside the ranch hands, learning to ride, to rope, to understand the rhythms of raising livestock. The boy was good at it, patient, observant. He had a way with animals that surprised everyone. Marcus watched his son grow into himself in ways that wouldn't have been possible in Seattle. Out here, with space and purpose and honest work, Ethan was becoming someone Marcus was proud to know. One evening, Jake Santos stopped by in his patrol car. He'd been promoted to acting sheriff while Hutchins awaited trial. The town council was expected to make it permanent. "How's it going out here?" Santos asked, accepting a beer on the porch. "Good. Better than good, actually." Marcus gestured at the ranch, at the work they'd done. "We're making something here. I heard Vincent came by." Marcus nodded. "That must have been strange for you, finding out your uncle's killer was actually trying to save him." Santos was quiet for a moment. "It changes the story. Doesn't bring Carlos back, but it changes how I remember him. He died standing up for what was right. There's honor in that." They drank their beers and watched the sunset. 2 men connected by tragedy, but choosing to move forward rather than stay trapped in the past. "Your grandfather would be proud," Santos said, "of what you've done here, of how you've handled all this." "I hope so." The summer deepened into August. The ranch thrived. Marcus and Ethan fell into rhythms that felt natural, comfortable. They worked together, ate meals together, sat on the porch in the evenings together. Father and son, building something that would last. Marcus started therapy, driving to Billings once a week to talk to a counselor about trauma and guilt, and learning to live with complicated histories. It helped. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. Like water wearing down stone. He talked to Sarah more frequently. Their conversations grew easier. She was seeing someone new, she told him. A teacher, someone stable. Marcus found he was happy for her. Their marriage was over, but that didn't mean he wanted her unhappy. They negotiated a new custody arrangement. Summers and alternating holidays with Marcus in Montana. School year with Sarah in Seattle. It was fair. It worked. Ethan seemed relieved to have stability, to know what to expect. In late August, Martha Chen stopped by the ranch. She'd been William's neighbor, Tom's widow. She brought pie and sat at the kitchen table while Marcus made coffee. "I heard about Vincent," she said, "about what really happened." Marcus poured coffee into mugs. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For your husband, for the lies, for everything." Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took Marcus's hand. "Your grandfather tried to save my Tom. I heard that from Vincent himself. He came to see me last week. Told me everything." Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "For 30 years, I was angry at William. Angry he survived when Tom didn't. But that wasn't fair. He tried. He nearly died trying. And he spent 3 decades punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault." Martha squeezed Marcus's hand. "Don't you do the same thing. Don't carry guilt for your grandfather's choices. Live your life. Raise your boy. Make this ranch something good again." After she left, Marcus found Ethan in the barn, brushing down one of the horses. "We're going to stay, aren't we?" Ethan asked. Even after the trial, even after everything. Marcus leaned against the stall, watching his son work. "Do you want to stay?" "Yeah, I like it here. I like who I am here." "Me too," Marcus said. "Yeah, we're staying." September arrived, bringing cooler nights and the first hint of fall in the air. The trial loomed. Marcus prepared himself mentally for what was coming, for seeing Dean Mercer again, for facing down the man who tried to destroy his family. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had the truth. He had his son. He had a home worth fighting for. The ranch was operating smoothly now. The barn was full of hay for winter. The cattle were healthy. The fences were strong. Everything William had built and then let decay was coming back to life under Marcus's care. He thought about that sometimes. How his grandfather had let this place die because he couldn't forgive himself. How guilt had poisoned everything, making William unable to enjoy anything, unable to maintain anything, unable to live. Marcus wouldn't make that mistake. He'd carry his own regrets, his own failures, but he wouldn't let them define his future. He'd learn from the past without being imprisoned by it. One night, unable to sleep, Marcus went to William's study and opened the journal to a blank page. He wrote slowly, carefully, thinking about his grandfather, about Ethan, about all the generations that would come after. To whoever reads this next, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm 50 years old. I came to Montana thinking I'd find a fresh start. Instead, I found my grandfather's secrets, his guilt, his 30-year silence that nearly destroyed him. But I also found something else. I found that truth, however painful, is better than comfortable lies. I found that standing your ground matters. I found that love, real love, means being honest even when it's hard. I have a son, Ethan. He's 11 years old. He's brave and smart and kind. He deserves to know the truth about where he comes from, about the good men and the bad choices, about the complexity of being human. Your great-great-grandfather, William Webb, was a good man who made hard choices in an impossible situation. He saved one life and lost 3 others. He carried that guilt alone until it killed him. Don't carry your burdens alone. Don't let shame make you silent. Don't let guilt poison what could be good. The men who died here, Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, Jimmy Walsh, they were heroes. They stood up to evil. They died fighting for what was right. Honor them by living well, by standing firm, by telling the truth. This ranch has seen violence and tragedy, but it's also seen courage and sacrifice and men trying to do right by each other. Remember both sides of that history. Ethan, if you're reading this someday, know that your father loved you enough to fight for you. Know that you come from a line of imperfect men who kept trying anyway. Be proud of that. Be better than we were. Marcus signed his name, dated it, and closed the journal. Tomorrow would bring the trial, would bring Dean Mercer and lawyers and judgment. But tonight, the ranch was peaceful. His son was safe upstairs. The Montana sky stretched vast and full of stars above them. He walked out to the porch and sat in the darkness, listening to the night sounds. The wind through the grass, the distant call of an owl, the creak of the old house settling. This was home now. Not because it was easy, not because the past was resolved, but because this was where they'd chosen to stand, where they'd chosen to build something better from the ashes of what came before. Marcus thought about his grandfather sitting in this same spot, carrying his burden alone, thought about all the conversations they could have had, all the forgiveness that could have been exchanged. I understand now, Marcus said quietly to the darkness. I understand why you kept silent, but I also understand why that silence killed you. He stood, stretched, felt his 50-year-old body protest. Time for bed. Tomorrow would come early. Ranch work didn't care about trials or trauma. The cattle needed feeding. The fences needed checking. Life continued, demanding you show up. Marcus went inside, locked the door, and climbed the stairs. He checked on Ethan, found his son sleeping peacefully, book open on his chest. Marcus gently removed the book, turned off the lamp, pulled the covers up. In his own room, Marcus lay down in his grandfather's bed and closed his eyes. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, he slept through the night without nightmares, without dreams of fire and screaming, without the weight of 30-year-old ghosts pressing on his chest. He slept like a man who'd finally found peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, in the darkness of a Montana ranch house, Marcus Webb was exactly where he needed to be. Home. The trial began on a cold October morning, 6 weeks after the siege. Marcus and Ethan drove to Billings in darkness, watching the sun rise over the plains as they traveled. The courthouse was a granite building downtown, imposing in the way government architecture always tried to be. Media vans lined the street. Reporters with cameras and microphones clustered near the entrance. A corruption case involving a sheriff, a wealthy developer, and a 30-year-old murder cover-up made for good television. Captain Morrison met them at a side entrance, guiding them through security away from the cameras. "How are you holding up?" she asked Marcus. "I've been better. I've been worse." The courtroom was packed. Families of the victims sat in the front rows. Rosa Torres wore black, rosary beads in her hands. Martha Chen sat straight-backed and dignified. Behind them, townspeople from Meridian Flats filled the gallery, come to witness justice they'd waited 3 decades to see. Dean Mercer entered in handcuffs in an orange jumpsuit. He'd aged in 6 weeks, hair whiter, face more lined. The confident developer who'd stood outside Marcus's ranch with 8 armed men was gone. This was just an old man facing the consequences of his choices. Sheriff Ray Hutchins came next, also in orange, also diminished. His badge had been stripped, his pension revoked, his reputation destroyed. He looked at the gallery once, saw the faces of people he'd sworn to serve and protect, and looked away. The trial lasted 4 days. The prosecution presented their case with methodical precision. The recordings played in open court, Hutchins' voice planning a child's murder echoing off the walls. Dean Mercer's voice cold and calculating as he discussed poisoning William Webb. Vincent Mercer testified on day 2. He walked to the stand slowly, his scarred face visible to everyone. He placed his bandaged hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. His testimony was devastating. He described the night of the fire in detail. How his brothers, Dean and Marcus, had gone insane when Vincent was shot. How they'd set the bunkhouse ablaze without checking who else was inside. How William Webb had pulled Vincent through a window while his own clothes were burning. "I owe William Webb my life," Vincent said quietly, "and I've spent 30 years wishing he'd saved someone else instead." The defense attorney tried to break him, tried to paint him as a career criminal whose testimony couldn't be trusted. But Vincent didn't flinch. "I was a criminal. I ran drugs. I threatened families. Everything Dean says about who I was back then is true. But what happened that night is also true. William Webb tried to save everyone. He succeeded with me. He failed with Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, and Jimmy Walsh. And that failure haunted him until his last breath." Marcus testified on day 3. He spoke about finding his grandfather's journal, about the surveillance equipment, about the threats against Ethan, about the recording of Hutchins and Mercer planning murder. The defense attorney was gentler with him. Marcus was the victim here, the man who'd nearly lost his son. There was no winning strategy in attacking him. On day 4, Tomas Torres took the stand. He'd pleaded guilty to conspiracy months ago and was testifying as part of his deal. He wore the orange jumpsuit like everyone else, but his demeanor was different, remorseful, honest. He described how Dean Mercer had found him in Mexico, how Dean had shown him carefully selected newspaper clippings, how Dean had told him William Webb murdered Carlos and got away with it because sheriffs protected their own. "I wanted to believe him," Tomas said. "I was 17 when my father died. I grew up angry. When Dean offered me a chance at justice, I took it." "But it wasn't justice, was it?" the prosecutor asked. "No, it was revenge based on lies. And I almost helped murder a child because of it. Why did you stop?" Thomas looked at Marcus in the gallery. "Because Marcus Webb showed me the truth. He showed me a photograph of my father standing with William Webb. 'Good men,' it said on the back. 'Good day.' And I realized my father would be ashamed of what I'd become." The defense rested without calling Dean or Hutchins to testify. There was nothing they could say that wouldn't make things worse. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Marcus waited in the hallway with Ethan, drinking bad coffee from a vending machine, watching lawyers and families and reporters move past. When the jury returned, everyone filed back into the courtroom. The foreman stood, a man in his 50s wearing a hardware store uniform. "Guilty on all counts." Dean Mercer showed no reaction. He'd known this was coming. Murder, conspiracy to murder, corruption, racketeering. The charges had been overwhelming. Hutchins put his head in his hands. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, read the sentences without emotion. Dean Mercer, life in prison without possibility of parole. Ray Hutchins, 25 years with possibility of parole after 15. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Rosa Torres crossed herself. Martha Chen gripped the bench in front of her. Jake Santos, sitting in the back row in his sheriff's uniform, nodded once. Justice. Finally. Tomas Torres would be sentenced separately. His cooperation and his turn away from violence at the crucial moment would be noted. 3 years with credit for time served, impossibility of parole after 18 months. It wasn't freedom, but it was mercy. After the verdict, Marcus and Ethan stood outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed, but Morrison's officers kept them back. Marcus made a brief statement. My grandfather, William Webb, lived with guilt for 30 years. He believed he'd failed the men who trusted him. But the truth is, he tried to save them all. He succeeded with one and failed with three, and that failure destroyed him. Today, the men who actually caused those deaths have been held accountable. Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, and Jimmy Walsh can finally rest in peace. He took Ethan's hand and walked through the crowd to their truck. 3 weeks after the trial, Meridian Flats held a memorial ceremony. The town council had commissioned a bronze plaque to be mounted in the square. It read, "In memory of Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, and Jimmy Walsh, heroes who stood against evil. August 16, 1991. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday. Marcus and Ethan drove in early, helped set up chairs on the grass. The whole town seemed to turn out. 200 people or more, standing in the November cold, breath misting in the air. Jake Santos spoke first, his sheriff's uniform pressed and perfect. My uncle Carlos died protecting what he believed in. Truth, justice, basic human dignity. For 30 years, this town lived with a lie. Today, we honor the truth and the men who died for it." Martha Chen spoke next. Her voice wavered but held. "My husband Tom was a good man. He didn't deserve to die in that fire. But I'm grateful to finally know how he really died. Fighting, not helpless. Standing with friends against evil. That matters. That matters so much." Rosa Torres approached the podium slowly, leaning on Jake's arm. She spoke in Spanish first, then English. "My brother Carlos left behind a son who was led astray by lies and revenge. But Carlos also left behind a legacy of courage. I choose to remember that. I choose to forgive. I choose to help my nephew find his way back to the man his father would want him to be." She looked at Marcus in the crowd, and I thank Marcus Webb for telling the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. Like his grandfather, he stood up when it mattered. Then Marcus was called to speak. He hadn't prepared anything. Didn't know what to say to a town full of people who'd lived with this tragedy for 30 years. He stood at the podium, Ethan beside him, and spoke from the heart. "My grandfather, William Webb, was not a perfect man. He made mistakes. He kept secrets. He let guilt eat him from the inside. But he also tried, in his flawed way, to protect people from evil. Carlos, Tom, and Jimmy stood with him. They were brave. They died heroes." Marcus's voice caught. He took a breath, continued. "I hope that by telling the truth, by honoring these men today, we can finally let them rest. And I hope the next generation learns from our mistakes. That silence doesn't protect. That truth, however painful, is better than comfortable lies. That standing up to evil is worth the cost, even when the cost is high." He looked at Ethan. "My son taught me something. He taught me that you don't honor the dead by staying silent. You honor them by living well, by standing firm, by being brave enough to tell the truth." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. 200 people, heads bowed, remembering 3 men who died trying to do right. Afterward, people approached Marcus. Strangers mostly, townspeople who wanted to shake his hand, to thank him for speaking up, to welcome him to Meridian Flats properly. Rosa pulled him aside, gripped his hands in hers. "Your grandfather was a good man who carried bad guilt. Don't you do the same. Live your life. Raise your boy. Make that ranch something beautiful again." "I'm trying. You're succeeding." Vincent Mercer appeared at the edge of the crowd, keeping his distance. Marcus saw him and walked over. They stood together, 2 men connected by tragedy, watching the town disperse. "Are you staying?" Marcus asked. "No, I'm going back to Oregon tomorrow. Back to being someone else. But I wanted to be here today. Wanted to see them honored properly. Thank you for coming forward, for telling the truth." Vincent looked at the plaque, at the names of the 3 men who died. "It should have been me, you know. I was the criminal. I was the one who brought evil to this place. Carlos, Tom, Jimmy, they were innocent. My grandfather didn't think so. He tried to save you all. You were just the one close enough to reach. Doesn't make it fair." No, but it makes it real, and we have to live with real, not fair. Vincent nodded slowly. Your grandfather said something similar once, that life isn't about what you deserve. It's about what you do with what you're given. He extended his bandaged hand. Marcus shook it carefully. Take care of that ranch. Take care of your boy. Don't waste your second chance the way I wasted mine. I won't. After Vincent left, Marcus and Ethan drove back to the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and red. The same colors as fire, Marcus thought, but also the colors of endings that make room for new beginnings. The months that followed were about rebuilding, not just the ranch, but Marcus himself. He continued therapy every week, driving to Billings to sit in Dr. Morgan's office and talk about trauma and guilt and learning to live with complicated histories. It helped. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, like water wearing down stone. He learned things about himself, learned that his failure as a husband hadn't been about Sarah. It had been about him, checking out emotionally years before the divorce. Learned that his distance from Ethan had been fear. Fear of failing at fatherhood the way he'd failed at everything else. Dr. Morgan helped him see that failure wasn't final, that trying again, doing better, was the only way forward. The ranch thrived. The cattle operation grew. Marcus hired 3 full-time hands now, local men who knew the land. They taught him about rotating pastures, about reading weather, about the 1,000 small things that made the difference between a ranch that survived and one that prospered. Ethan spent Christmas break at the ranch. He'd grown 2 inches since summer. His voice was starting to change. He was becoming someone new, someone more confident and capable than the withdrawn boy who'd left Seattle. On Christmas morning, they opened presents by the fireplace. Marcus gave Ethan a leather journal, his great-grandfather's name embossed on the cover. William Webb. I thought you could write in it, Marcus said. Your own story, your own thoughts. So someday when you're older, you'll remember this time. Remember what we went through. Remember what we learned. Ethan flipped through the blank pages. What should I write? Whatever's true, that's all that matters. The truth. That evening after dinner, they sat on the porch despite the cold. The Montana sky was crystal clear, stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Marcus wrapped a blanket around Ethan, and they sat together watching constellations wheel overhead. Dad, Ethan said quietly, do you ever regret coming here? Marcus thought about it honestly. Everything that happened, the fear, the violence, the weight of his grandfather's secrets. And then he thought about the man he'd been in Seattle, hollowed out, failing, invisible to his own son. No, I don't regret it. It was hard. It was terrifying sometimes, but it was real. And I'd rather have a real hard life than a fake easy one. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, father and son, partners in survival. I talked to your mom yesterday, Marcus said. She wants you for New Year's in Seattle. And I said yes. But I also told her I want you here next summer, full summer. And she agreed. Ethan nodded. That's fair. More than fair. It's right. Your mom loves you. I love you. And you deserve both of us doing our best. Sarah called that night. Marcus answered in the kitchen while Ethan read by the fire. Merry Christmas, Sarah said. Merry Christmas. How is he? Good. Really good. Growing like a weed, voices changing. Sarah was quiet for a moment. He sounds happy when we talk. Really happy. Whatever you're doing out there, Marcus, it's working. We're just spending time together, doing real work, being honest with each other. That's more than we ever did. Marcus didn't argue. It was true. I'm seeing someone, Sarah said. James, he's a teacher. Good man, stable. The kids like him. I'm happy for you, really. And I'm happy Ethan has you, the real you, not the ghost who was going through the motions. After the call, Marcus sat in the kitchen with the lights off, looking out at the dark ranch. The barn was lit up, the new construction solid and strong. The livestock pens were full, the fences were straight, everything was as it should be. His phone buzzed. A text from Jake Santos. Got news about Torres. Parole hearing approved. He'll be out in 3 months. Marcus texted back. That's good. He earned it. Jake agreed. He asked if he could work at the ranch when he gets out. Said he wants to make amends. What do you think? Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Tomas Torres had threatened his son, had been part of a conspiracy to murder them both. But he'd also turned at the crucial moment, had chosen truth over revenge, had testified against Dean Mercer even though it meant prison time. Tell him yes, Marcus typed. Tell him there's a job here if he wants it. Clean slate. In March, spring arrived with sudden warmth and the first green shoots pushing through the earth. Marcus was mending fence on the north pasture when he saw a truck coming up the access road. Tomas Torres climbed out, thinner than before, beard longer, eyes cautious. Marcus walked over, work gloves still on. Tomas stood by his truck, uncertain. "I wasn't sure you'd really hire me." "I said I would." "I know, but people say a lot of things they don't mean." Marcus extended his hand. "I mean what I say." Tomas shook it, gripped firm. "Thank you, I won't let you down. You let me down once already. Don't do it again." "I won't." Tomas worked hard, showed up early, stayed late, never complained. He had a way with the cattle that surprised everyone. Patient, gentle. Marcus watched him and saw a man trying to rebuild himself from the ground up. They didn't talk much those first weeks. The work spoke for itself. But one evening as they were closing up the barn, Tomas stopped Marcus. "I need to tell you something. I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything. For believing lies about your grandfather. For threatening your son. For being the kind of man my father would have been ashamed of." Marcus set down the hay bale he was carrying. "Your father would have understood. People make mistakes when they're hurting. That doesn't excuse it. No, but it explains it. And you stopped when it mattered. You chose truth. That counts for something." Tomas's eyes were wet. "I think about that kid, Ethan, and how close I came to." He couldn't finish. "But you didn't. You turned back. That's the difference between you and Dean Mercer." He never turned back. How do I live with it? With knowing what I almost did? Same way anyone lives with regret. You do better. You become someone your father would be proud of. You honor his memory by being a good man. Thomas nodded slowly. "I'm trying." "I know. Keep trying. That's all any of us can do." Summer arrived, and with it, Ethan. The boy stepped off the plane in Billings taller again, voice deeper, but still recognizably himself. Marcus picked him up and they drove back to the ranch, catching up on 3 months of separation. Ethan talked about school, about friends, about his mom's new boyfriend James, who was apparently pretty cool for a teacher. Marcus listened, asked questions, stayed present in a way he never had before. At the ranch, Ethan dropped his bags and immediately headed for the barn. Marcus followed, smiling. The boy had become a ranch kid in his bone. Thomas was working in the back stall. He looked up when Ethan entered, and Marcus saw fear flash across his face. Fear of rejection, fear of confronting the child he'd almost helped murder. Ethan walked right up to him. "Mr. Torres." "Ethan." Tomas's voice was rough. "I owe you an apology." "My dad said you apologized already." "To him, not to you." Tomas crouched down to be at eye level. "I helped plan to hurt you, to scare your father by threatening you. And I'm sorrier for that than I've ever been for anything in my life." Ethan was quiet for the moment. "My great-grandfather used to say that good men can carry bad guilt, and that becoming good is the best way to honor the people we love." Tomas's eyes widened. "That's almost exactly what my father used to say." "I know, my dad told me." Ethan extended his hand. "I forgive you, Mr. Torres, and I think my great-grandfather would want me to. And I think your father would want you to forgive yourself." Tomas shook the boy's hand, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, that means more than you know." After Ethan walked away, Tomas stood in the barn crying silently, shoulders shaking. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder and said nothing. Some moments didn't need words. The summer passed in a rhythm of work and life. Marcus taught Ethan more about ranching, about cattle and horses and the land. They rode out to check fences together, sat on hilltops watching the sun set, talked about everything and nothing. One evening in August, sitting on the porch after dinner, Ethan asked the question Marcus had been waiting for. "Dad, what happens when I'm older? When I'm 18? Do I have to choose between here and Seattle?" Marcus had thought about this a lot. "No, you don't have to choose. This is your home. Seattle is your home. You get to have both. You get to be whoever you want to be." "What if I want to stay here? Run the ranch someday?" "Then you stay here and run the ranch. And I'll be proud of you." "What if I want to go to college somewhere else? Become something different?" "Then you do that. And I'll still be proud of you." Ethan leaned against his father. "I think I want both. I think I want to learn other things, see other places. But always come back here. Make this home base." "Sounds perfect to me." The next day, Marcus sat in William's study and opened the journal to a fresh page. He'd been writing in it periodically over the year, documenting the rebuilding, the trial, the healing. Now he wrote something different, a letter to his son, to be read someday when Ethan was older. To Ethan, I'm writing this on August 16th, 1 year after we arrived at this ranch. 1 year since we started learning the truth about your great-grandfather and the men who died here. You're 12 years old now. By the time you read this, you'll be older. Maybe 18, heading off to college. Maybe 25, deciding what to do with your life. Maybe 50, looking back and trying to understand where you came from. I want you to know some things. First, your great-grandfather, William Webb, was a good man who made hard choices in an impossible situation. He saved one life and lost three others. He carried that guilt alone until it poisoned him. Don't make his mistake. Don't carry your burdens alone. Share them with people who love you. Second, the men who died here, Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, and Jimmy Walsh, were heroes. They stood up to evil when it would have been easier to look away. They died fighting for what was right. Honor them by living well, by standing firm, by being brave enough to tell the truth. Third, Thomas Torres threatened us, nearly helped kill us, but he turned back at the crucial moment. He chose truth over revenge. And now he's here, working beside us, trying to become the man his father would be proud of. Remember that people can change. Remember that redemption is possible for those who truly seek it. Fourth, your mother and I failed at marriage. That's not her fault or mine. It's just reality. But we both love you. We both want what's best for you. And we've learned to work together to give you that. Family takes many forms. All of them are valid if love is present. Fifth, this ranch is yours someday. Not because you have to take it, but because it's your inheritance, your legacy. You get to decide what to do with it. Keep it, sell it, transform it into something new. Whatever you choose, know that I support you. Sixth, and most important, you are not defined by your grandfather's guilt or your father's failures. You are not bound by our mistakes. You get to write your own story. Make it a good one. Make it true. I love you, son. I'm proud of the man you're becoming. I'm grateful every day that I get to be your father. Keep standing up when it matters. Keep telling the truth. Keep being brave. That's all any of us can do. Your father, Marcus Webb, August 16, 2025. He signed it, dated it, and closed the journal. Someday Ethan would read it. Someday his son would understand the full weight of what had happened here. But for now, the boy was just a boy, learning to ride, learning to work, learning to be himself. That evening, the whole ranch gathered for dinner. Marcus had started a tradition over the summer. Once a week, everyone ate together. Marcus, Ethan, the three ranch hands, and Tomas. They'd set up a long table in the yard, cook steaks on the grill, and share a meal like a family. Jake Santos stopped by, bringing beer and news from town. Rosa came too, bringing homemade tamales. Even Martha Chen arrived, her first visit to the ranch in 30 years. They ate and talked and laughed as the sun set. Stories were shared, jokes were told. Marcus looked around the table and felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Peace. Real peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of connection, of community, of people who'd been through hell together and chosen to build something better on the other side. After everyone left, after Ethan had gone to bed, Marcus walked out to the barn. The memorial plaque he'd commissioned had arrived yesterday. He'd had it mounted on the barn wall where everyone could see it. It read, "This barn was rebuilt in 2018 in memory of Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, and Jimmy Walsh, heroes who stood against evil. May their courage inspire all who work this land." Marcus traced the engraved letters with his fingers. Three men he'd never known. Three men whose deaths had haunted his grandfather and shaped his entire family's history. Three men who deserved to be remembered not as victims, but as heroes. He heard footsteps behind him. Tomas coming out of the bunkhouse. "Can't sleep?" Marcus asked. "Too much thinking." They stood together, looking at the plaque. "My father's name is on a memorial," Tomas said quietly. "In the town square and here. That matters. That matters so much. He was a hero. He deserves to be remembered that way. Because of you. Because you told the truth. And because of you. Because you stopped being the person Dean Mercer wanted you to be and started being the person your father raised you to be." Thomas nodded slowly. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for earning it." The next morning, Marcus woke to find Ethan already outside, working with one of the horses. The boy was good with them, patient and intuitive. He'd be an excellent rancher someday if that's what he chose. But Marcus hoped he'd choose more. Hoped he'd go to college, see the world, learn things Marcus had never learned. And then, if he wanted, come back. Bring new knowledge to this old land. Make something even better than what they'd built. That afternoon, a package arrived. Federal Express sent from Oregon. Marcus opened it to find a letter from Vincent Mercer and something wrapped in tissue paper. The letter was brief. Marcus, I thought you should have this. It belonged to your grandfather. He gave it to me years ago when I testified in a federal case and had to meet with him. He said if anything happened to him, I should make sure it found its way to you. It's been in my safe deposit box for 20 years. Now it's where it belongs. Take care of yourself and that boy. Make that ranch something William would be proud of. I think you already have. Vincent. Marcus unwrapped the tissue paper carefully. Inside was a photograph. William Webb in his Special Forces uniform, young and strong, standing with his unit in Vietnam. On the back, in William's handwriting, brothers in arms. Some make it home, some don't. Remember all of them. Marcus stared at the photograph, at his grandfather's young face, and understood something he hadn't before. William had seen men die in Vietnam, had probably felt responsible for some of those deaths, had carried that guilt home, and then 30 years later, had it compounded by Carlos, Tom, and Jimmy. His grandfather hadn't just been haunted by one tragedy. He'd been haunted by a lifetime of them, and he'd borne it all alone, never sharing, never healing, until the weight crushed him. Marcus wouldn't make that mistake. He had Ethan, he had his therapist, he had Thomas and Jake and Rosa, and a whole community of people who'd learned that shared burdens were easier to carry. He took the photograph and hung it in the study next to the maps in the journal. A reminder, a memorial, a promise to honor the past by living well in the present. September arrived, and with it, time for Ethan to return to Seattle for school. They drove to Billings together, neither wanting the summer to end, but both knowing it had to. At the airport, Marcus hugged his son tight. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, Dad, but I'll be back for Thanksgiving and Christmas and next summer. I know, I'm counting on it. Ethan pulled back, looked his father in the eye. Dad, thank you. For what? For fighting for me, for bringing me here, for showing me what it means to stand up when it matters. Marcus felt his throat tighten. You showed me just as much, maybe more. After Ethan disappeared through security, Marcus sat in the airport for a long time, watching planes take off and land, thinking about the year that had passed, thinking about the man he'd been when he arrived in Montana and the man he was now. He wasn't perfect, still had bad days, still made mistakes, but he was trying, and trying, he'd learned, was enough. He drove back to the ranch as the sun set, the road familiar now, the landscape home. When he pulled up to the house, Tomas was closing up the barn. The other hands had gone home. The cattle were settled for the night. Everything okay? Tomas called out. Everything's fine. That night, Marcus sat on the porch alone, wrapped in a blanket against the early autumn cold. The stars were brilliant overhead. The wind carried the smell of sage and earth. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered. He thought about William, alone on this same porch for 30 years. Thought about the weight his grandfather had carried. Thought about how different things might have been if William had just told the truth, if he'd let people help him carry his burden. But Marcus also understood why he hadn't. Understood how guilt could make you believe you didn't deserve help, didn't deserve forgiveness, didn't deserve to live. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to his therapist, Dr. Morgan. Just checking in, doing okay. Ethan's back in Seattle, missing him but handling it. Thanks for everything. She replied immediately. Proud of you, Marcus. You've come a long way. See you next week. He sent another text, this one to Tomas. Thanks for your work today and for being here. Means a lot. Tomas, thank you for the chance. Sleep well, boss. One more text to Ethan. Miss you already. Love you. Proud of you. Always. Ethan, love you too, Dad. Best summer ever. Marcus pocketed his phone and sat in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. This was his life now. This land, this work, these people. It wasn't the life he'd imagined at 50. Wasn't the life he'd expected. But it was real. And it was his. And it was good. He stood, stretched, felt his body protest in the way 50-year-old bodies do after a day of physical work. He went inside, locked the door, climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Before sleep, he opened William's journal one last time and wrote a final entry. To whoever reads this last, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm 51 years old. A year ago, I came to Montana broken and failing. Today, I'm neither of those things. This ranch has seen violence and tragedy. It's seen good men die and bad men prosper. It's seen secrets and lies and guilt that poison generations. But it's also seen courage and redemption. It's seen fathers and sons reconnect. It's seen enemies become friends. It's seen truth triumph over lies. William Webb, my grandfather, lived and died here. He carried burdens he shouldn't have carried alone. He let guilt destroy what could have been a good life. I won't make his mistake. This ranch is more than land and buildings. It's a testament to what happens when people stand up for what's right, when they tell the truth even when it's hard, when they choose community over isolation. Carlos Torres, Tom Chen, and Jimmy Walsh died heroes. They're honored here, remembered here. Their sacrifice means something. To my son Ethan, to future generations, to anyone who comes after, learn from our mistakes. Don't carry your burdens alone. Don't let shame silence you. Don't let guilt poison what could be good. Stand up when it matters. Tell the truth. Be brave. Ask for help. Forgive when you can. That's all any of us can do. That's all any of us need to do. The ranch is yours now. Make it something good. Make it something true. Make it home. Marcus Webb, September 25. He closed the journal, turned off the light, and lay in the darkness. Outside, the Montana nights stretched vast and quiet. The ranch slept. The cattle rested. The land waited for morning. And Marcus Webb, once broken, once failing, once invisible to his own son, slept peacefully. No nightmares, no ghosts, no weight of 30-year-old guilt pressing on his chest. Just sleep, just rest, just peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Fences to mend, cattle to tend, a ranch to run. But tonight, in the darkness of a Montana ranch house, Marcus was exactly where he needed to be. Home. The end.